Hello and welcome to this meeting of the Planning and Development Council of the Town of Oakville. I apologize for our late start due to technical difficulties with that ubiquitous tool of the pandemic meetings called Zoom, but it's all fine now. Madam Clerk, do we have any regrets for this meeting?
We have no regrets this evening.
All right, thank you. Council, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Madam Clerk, I see none. Council, if you'd like to resolve into the relaxed rules condition of Committee of the Whole, two of you could move us. Councillor Adams, Councillor Knoll, thank you. Any objection to that motion? There being none, that motion carries. And I want to call your attention first to the public consent item 4.1, the Development Application Notice Report. And I'd like to ask, let's see, Councillor Adams has his hand up. Councillor Adams?
Thank you very much. I just wanted to flag that there is a proposed motion to add to this item with respect to expanding the area of notice to 240 meters. And I wondered if that had been circulated yet by the clerk.
Well, Councillor, would you please make your motion?
Okay, so just to verify, we're dealing with item 4.1, the development application notice report?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and the motion that we wished to be fair, it was actually Councillor Parmar that circulated it over to the clerks, and it read to add that all future statutory public meetings for draft plans of subdivision, official plan amendment, and zoning bylaw amendment applications require a mail-out notice to all properties within 240 meters of the subject property starting in January 2022, when fees for development applications are updated to reflect the increased circulation area.
Thank you, Councillor. I wonder if we should allow Councillor Parmar to be the mover of record on that. Councillor Parmar?
That was the intention, and
yes, thank you.
I was the first to put my hand up, that's all.
Thank you for your initiative. Councillor Parmar, does that suit you?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Councillor Adams.
Councillor Chisholm, your hand is up.
Yes, sure. Through you, Your Worship, just a question with respect to the radius, and I do agree with that. And I know it has varying differences from each ward. However, associated with the cost of that, is this something that has to be a budget consideration for next year's budget? It's a question through staff.
The answer would be no, because the intent is that the development fees recover those costs, hence the addition within the motion that we wait till January when we can update those fees.
Thanks, Councillor.
Good answer. Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Your Worship. So, I mean, does this motion constitute every single public notice that goes out, or just over site plan? And I don't have it before me. I can't read it. But what are we changing right here in terms of how we communicate with the public over any development going on in their area?
It's a distinct list. Either Councillor Parmar or Councillor Adams could reread or repeat that for you.
So it's for all future statutory public meetings for draft plans of subdivision, official plan amendment, and zoning bylaw amendment applications.
Okay, so I guess I would ask of staff, what's that excluding? What are we missing then? What is not being included in now an expanded list that we should probably be including in this? I don't know why we're doing this little piecemeal right now, and we're not looking at why don't we expand everything and see how we do that.
Well, Councillor, the intent of Councillor Parmar's initiative, I believe, well, perhaps I'll let her speak for herself, but I understood it to be to deal with these big statutory meetings rather than every little thing. Councillor Parmar, would you like to explain better?
No, I agree with what you've said, also taking into consideration the report provided from staff and kind of more in line. We looked at what the other municipalities were doing, and it does seem to be more of these bigger applications where the public would benefit to participate in the planning process from the beginning.
Thank you, Councillor. All right.
Okay, sorry, Your Worship. I get that. the residents in Ward 1 have a very hard time delineating what's a big application and what's not a big application. And I don't know where that line is right now. So I know that every single resident of mine wants, you know, the entire ward to be notified for every single development application. So I'm just trying to see what line we're drawing on here, that this might need a more fulsome discussion than just sort of sliding this by at this moment in time. I'm not trying, I agree with Councillor Palmer 100% on this, but I'm just, you know, if this is now the opportunity that we're going to talk about, you know, what our distribution is for communications on development, maybe we need to have a little bit more of a fulsome discussion on what that constitutes. That's my concern right now.
Well, Councillor, I would recommend that you take that concern up with staff. There's lots of time between now and January to expand this. If after that discussion and investigation, you come to that conclusion. In the meantime, since nobody's objecting to Councillor Palmer's motion, I would suggest that we pass hers and wait to see what happens with your inquiries. I'll take that for you might be in agreement. Reluctant agreement, perhaps. All right, may I put the vote? Is there an objection to the motion? Councillor, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. Councillor Hazlet-Thiel.
So my only question is, so it doesn't include site plan, but I guess further to Sean's, Councillor O'Meara's comment, could staff at least comment about those other elements that might be missing? I mean, I've had questions recently about development engineering permits, not when is there notification for it, etc. So just get clarity on, so for the public record, these ones will not fall under the 240? Because I totally agree with the 240.
Councillor, the report's very clear, and I would extend the same suggestion to you about the matters you're raising as I offered to Councillor O'Meara, and we might all be happy with that result instead of amending on the fly. Mr. Charles, do you have anything to add to the answer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. The applications that we would be extending the notice to would be those applications that we provide circulation on already, which are, as Councillor Palmer points out, draft plans of subdivision, OPAs, and zoning amendments. We don't circulate to the public on site plans, though there's no statutory requirement to do that, so therefore we don't circulate on those. The only other ones which could potentially be missing would just be committee of adjustment, and those tend to be smaller applications with a smaller radius. Those are 60-meter radius currently.
Thank you for clarifying that. So just procedurally, Mayor Burton, can you just confirm there doesn't need to be a 2/3 if it comes back to council with some adjustments based on discussions with staff, that it's not a reconsideration, but rather it's a new motion?
I can confirm that it would not be reconsideration.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Your Worship, can you please tell me where in my agenda is this motion about moving to 240? I cannot find it in my agenda, and I could have missed it, but I'm looking for it, and I do not see it in the information in front of me.
The clerks have circulated it to you by email as we were talking, as I understand it.
Okay, Your Worship, I move deferral of that item.
All right. I will put the vote on deferral. If you're in favor of deferral, please raise your hand. It was close, Councillor, but deferral fails. I'll put the vote on the consent item. If you are opposed to the consent item, please raise your hand. Thank you, Council. The consent item carries. We have a confidential consent item on the Ontario Land Tribunal appeal, the Brant Haven West Oak Inc. Matter. And the public motion is that staff be authorized to proceed in the appeals to the Ontario Land Tribunal filed by Brant Haven West Oak Inc. in respect of the proposed development of 2170 Postmaster Drive in accordance with the confidential report from the legal department dated August 31st, 2021, titled Ontario Land Tribunal Appeal, Brant Haven, West Oak, Inc. Is there a mover for this?
Sure.
Councillor Elgar moves it. May I put the vote? Is there any objection to this motion? Madam Clerk, there's no objection. That motion carries. Council, we now come to our public hearing items, and the first one is the public meeting report for a zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision at 160 Burnhamthorpe Road West. We have a presentation from Rob Thun, our senior planner, and if there is anyone watching the live stream of this meeting on oakville.ca and you wish to speak to this item, please call 905-815-6095 and we will connect you to the meeting. You'll be called upon to speak following the presentation of report and the registered delegations, if any. Council, the applicant has a planner standing by to answer questions if you have questions for them. Otherwise, there's not a proper delegation. Mr. Thun, you have the Zoom floor. We look forward to your report.
Thank you, Mayor Burton and members of council. As you had mentioned, this is a zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision application submitted by Docasa Group Limited for the development of 18.5 hectares of land located on the south side of Burnhamthorpe Road West, west of 6th Line, and it's municipally owned or known as 160 Burnhamthorpe Road West. The report can be found on page 30, item 6.1 of tonight's agenda. As with all statutory public meetings, the purpose of tonight's presentation is to introduce this application to council and to the public and to obtain any further comments for review as related to the application. Mayor Burton, thank you for the delegation telephone number there. Once again, that number, should there be someone interested in speaking, 905-815-6095. Slide. The slide before council is the location map. It identifies the site and its contacts with the surrounding area. Council has already dealt with, from a statutory public meeting perspective, Star Oak, Digram, and Mattamy. Those are the three abutting properties to this application. The subject lands are surrounded by vacant agricultural land presently. However, they will be developed for residential uses in the future. The site itself is within the watershed of the West Morrison Creek, as identified by the North Oakville Creek's subwatershed study. Slide, please. The proposal before council, the zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision, relates to 425 units in total, consisting of 114 detached dwellings, 94 semi-detached dwellings, 89 townhouses, and 128 units within the mid-rise building in blocks 177 and 178. There's also one natural heritage system block associated with the West Morrison Creek. It is in this corner. It's block 189. Included in the draft plan is a park block, that's 188, and also a school block, 187. This school block will be enlarged with lands to the south on the Mattamy plan of subdivision. And also then the road network has also been identified. Access to the site would be from Burnhamthorpe Road and the abutting southerly and easterly draft plans of subdivision. So once again, you have Star Oak on your right-hand side, you have Mattamy to the south, and you have Digram sort of bottom right-hand corner. The applicant did hold a virtual public information meeting on July 28th. 4 members of the public were in attendance. I have not received any written submissions from the public as the date of this meeting. This property is also part of the approved 2020 Regional Servicing Allocation Program. One of the matters that is on the list of issues to be reviewed is on-street parking. The intent is to maximize the number of parking spaces within this development. And also for clarification, in reviewing my report, reference was made in the report to streets 1 and 2. it should reflect streets A and B. So A is this road right here, and B is this road right here. 1 and 2 reflected the Star Oak draft plan of subdivision that connects up to this site. So my apologies for that and the clarification. Slide. From the secondary plan perspective, the North Oakville East secondary plan, the subject lands are designated natural area and natural heritage system area on figure NOE2, the land use plan. And the arrow on the land use plan identifies a general location where the subject property is. From the master plan perspective, which is in the bottom right-hand corner of the slide, the lands are further identified as natural heritage system area, which is the green, the general urban, which is the gray, the neighborhood center area, red, the neighborhood park, green, and the school also with a symbol beside the neighborhood park. The master plan, as mentioned previously, is a 2008 concept for the area. It is only one option. There are other options that could be reviewed, provided the principles of the North Oakville master plan or secondary plan are adhered to. We will continue to review the development application in relation to the master plan and to the associated road patterns. Slide, please. From a zoning bylaw perspective, this is in the North Oakville zoning bylaw. The subject lands are zoned existing development, ED. And once again, ED only allows those uses legally existing on the date of the parent bylaw coming to effect, which was 2009. The proposed application proposes to rezone the site to neighborhood center, general urban, natural heritage system, park, and institutional for the school. Each of those zones will have site-specific regulations that are under review. They are not accepted yet. They're still under review. And that the applicant's full zoning bylaw amendment can be found on Appendix A1 of the staff report. So once again, staff are continuing to work with the applicant on the amendment. Slide, please. This slide reflects matters identified in the staff report to date and are captured on the slide before you. The review of the plan will continue. As always, not all comments have been received. Those comments will be included in matters to be addressed and part of the future recommendation report. All comments raised tonight by the public and by council will be addressed as part of that future recommendation report. Slide, please. In conclusion, Your Worship, members of council, staff before the following recommendation for council's consideration. Once again, the additional comments received tonight will form part of the record and will be addressed in the recommendation report. Thank you very much, Your Worship, and look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Thun. Councillor Palmer has questions or possibly issues to add to your issues list. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Thun, for your presentation. I'm pleased that maximizing parking is a priority for staff in terms of the issues list. I do have a question about the mid-rise buildings. I was wondering if the applicant has determined what the height of the mid-rise buildings will be?
Through the mayor to the councillor, the height of the mid-rise building is proposed at 6 stories. That is consistent with OPA 321. The zoning bylaw at present is 5, but they are proposing, considering OPA 321, increasing it to 6.
Okay, thank you. And then, sorry, you clarified it in your presentation. You said Street 1 and Street 2, but you actually meant to write, it was at Street A and Street B?
That is correct.
So is the activity node by the mid-rise buildings then?
That is correct.
Okay. And then just also, just because of recent issues that Councillor Sandu and I have faced in already, I know what we would call stable neighborhoods here in North Oakville, in our ward, is that, you know, the mid-rise buildings came at the very end of the subdivision development. Is there an opportunity, and I'm just putting this out there, to work with the developer, the applicant now to ensure or have a plan as to when those mid-rise buildings will be built, and also to ensure that residents are notified. And if I can just expand on that, for example, I know that in the sales offices for some of these areas, that mid-rise area was referred to as activity node, and that doesn't really scream out mid-rise buildings. So just wondering if there's an opportunity to have that discussion with the applicant now as staff works through this application with them.
Through you, Mayor Burton, to the councillor, absolutely. That could be an issue raised on the issues list. The mid-rise building is a mixed-use building right on the corner. So it will have ground floor commercial and residential above. The applicant is proposing an apartment building on block 177, which is just to the north of that. But you're correct, the activity node is centered on streets A and streets B, or streets 1 and 2 from the adjoining subdivision.
Okay, thank you. That would be great. And then my last question is, do we know where this school site is on the Halton District School Board's capital priority list? I know they have a priority list of all the schools, and is this site on it?
Through you, Mayor Burton, my understanding is they would like to have this open by 2024, 2025. So it's critical that the lands get assembled and a path towards construction is put forward. So it is critical that the subdivision be dealt with.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. We have questions from Councillor Chisholm and Councillor Haslett-Deal. Councillor Chisholm.
Thanks, Robert, for the presentation. Just a quick question with respect to clarity when you talk stories. What's that in meters in the middle, the center part? How many meters are we talking about? Height?
Well, when through your worship, the commercial first floor is usually 4.5, and the residential components above that are typically 3. So you got 3 at 5 and 1 at 4, so you're just under 20 meters.
Thank you.
Councillor Haslett-Deal.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Burton. Could you just remind me when the discussions may occur with the developer around greater efforts around climate change? So the types of materials that they're going to use, the kind of heating that they might put into the plan.
Through you, Mayor Burton, to the Councillor Haslett-Deal, I will take that up as a discussion item with the developer as part of the issues list. Typically, we don't get involved in the building construction. However, we can get a direction from them of how they want to proceed through this process.
So as a follow-up to that, is there any opportunity, I know we haven't done this, but is there any opportunity or changes that we could make that would either incent or I forget, I'm not sure it's shall or which word to use, but that using better building materials, more environmentally friendly building materials, is there procedurally something we can do in the planning process that we're not doing that would heighten that for the developers?
Through you, Mayor Burton, part of the issue is the building code. The building code requires certain insulation values, certain construction techniques and whatnot. So that's the minimum that they have to adhere to. So as I said, I will take this discussion up with the developer, who will pass it on to his builders and see what we can do to increase the sensitivity through climate change techniques.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Madam Clerk, has anyone phoned in to be a delegation? Mr. Charles, are you ready to read the additions to the issues list?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, what I heard from council were those items which were in addition to those listed in the staff report was to also work with the applicant owner to ensure timely construction of the mid-rise buildings in blocks 177 and 178, and ensure warning clauses alert future purchasers of potential height of buildings within these blocks, as well as work with the developer regarding what climate change initiatives can be incorporated into the design of the subdivision, and identify construction materials for new buildings that will help address climate change issues.
Thank you, Mr. Charles. Councillor Palmer, could I correctly assume that you would move the report? Thank you. Council, is there any objection to the motion? Madam Clerk, there being no objection, the motion carries. Thank you, everybody. We now have the same kind of report. This is a public meeting report. Again, this is not a decision report. This is a collect issues report. And we have a presentation from our same senior planner, Robert Dunn. And this is for a zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision by Timson Holding Corp. on 6th line. Mr. Thun, you have the Zoom floor again.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. If I could have the presentation up, please, item 6.2. Thank you. Once again, this is a zoning bylaw amendment application and draft plan of subdivision application. It's been submitted by Timson Holding Corporation for the development of 6.2 hectares of land located on the west side of 6th line at and immediately north of North Park Boulevard. The report can be found on page 62, which is item 6.2 of tonight's agenda. Similar to the previous application, the purpose of tonight's presentation is to introduce the application to council and the public and to obtain any further comments for review as related to this application. And again, the number on the screen, 905-815-6095, is a telephone number should there members of the public wish to provide any further input. Slide, please. The slide before council is a location of the subject property in red. It identifies the site and its context with the surrounding area. To the north of the property is the Argo development, which council has previously seen. To the west or the left is Core 5 as identified within the North Oakville Creek's sub-watershed study. And the Mattamy subdivision to the southeast or southwest, I'll call it. And the first phase of the Timson subdivision, which was dealt with, if I remember correctly, around the 2012 timeframe. So that is the immediately south of the subject property. The site is traversed, similar to the previous application, by the West Morrison Creek, identified in the Oakville Creek sub-watershed study, and it goes diagonal through the subdivision that's being proposed or existing right now. Residential uses are envisioned in the North Oakville East secondary plan for the site and are presently constructed to the east, south, and west. Slide, please. The proposal is the proposal on the screen is a draft plan of subdivision, and I apologize, council, it looks to be a little bit fuzzy there. Hopefully it comes through well. The proposal relates to 22 detached dwellings, 14 semi-detached dwellings, and 21 townhouses. Access to the site would be from 6th line, which is North Park Boulevard, and also from a road that would be the extension from the Argo subdivision just to the immediate north. The applicant did hold a virtual public meeting on the 28th. It was the combined meeting with DOCASA, which council just dealt with. Those same 4 members of the public were at this overall meeting. No comments were received. And again, this property is part of the 2020 Regional Servicing Allocation Program. And as is always an issue with the North Oakville development applications, on-street parking is a matter that needs to be addressed, and the maximization of those parking spaces within the development. Slide, please. From the North Oakville East secondary plan perspective, the site is designated neighborhood area and natural heritage system area on figure NOE2 as you see. The green area, which is a natural heritage system area, is the area related to the West Morrison Creek. From the master plan perspective, the site is identified as natural heritage system area, general urban, suburban, which is the lowest category for the secondary plan, and neighborhood center area. And those can be identified on Appendix 7.3, which is the North Oakville East Master Plan. Once again, the master plan is a concept, not the concept. So as long as the principles are being maintained, it should work out well. Staff are continuing to review the application in consideration of the master plan and with regards to the associated road pattern. Slide, please. From the North Oakville zoning bylaw perspective, as is all land in North Oakville, they're zoned ED, existing development, and those are only allowing for use as legally existing on the date of the parent bylaw coming into effect. From the proposed perspective, the applicant is looking at various site-specific zones. That's why you'll see the asterisks on the plan for the neighborhood center zone, general urban, the suburban, and the natural heritage system zone. And these are all to permit the redevelopment of site for the residential units and the natural heritage system. The applicant's full zoning bylaw can be found on Appendix A1, and we are still working with the applicant and we'll be bringing a recommendation in the future. Slide, please. This slide reflects the various matters identified by staff to date and are captured within the staff report. Review of the plan will continue. As mentioned previously, not all comments have been received, and those comments will be included as part of the recommendation. Comments together raised tonight by the public, should there be any public that wishes to provide input, and by council will be addressed at that recommendation stage. Slide, please. So in conclusion, Your Worship, we're putting forward the following recommendation for council's consideration. And once again, the additional comments will form part of the record and the future recommendation report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thun. Council, we have no delegations, and Councillor Parmer has comments and issues, I guess. Councillor Parmer.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks again, Mr. Thun, for your presentation. I just have some points of clarification. On the issues list for parking, it says 30 parking spaces are provided via on-street parking within the development, and then that it was assumed that some of the on-street parking would be provided along 6th line. Is that in addition to the 30 spaces, or it includes those 30 spaces?
The 6th line should be in addition to.
Okay, and then, I mean, is that being considered a part of the applicant meeting the requirement? Because I feel like in the past when we've had discussions on other applications, we had told the applicant not to rely on any of the 6th line parking, since that would be, you know, town parking, and not necessarily where we would want people parked all day, but for drop-offs and Amazon deliveries and that kind of stuff. So I'm just wondering if that is something that we're going to be looking into with this applicant.
Through you, Mayor Burton, to Councillor Parmar, when it comes to the visitors parking, each property will have 2 parking spaces, one in the garage, one in the driveway. So that will fulfill its requirement from a zoning perspective. The next part of the exercise is to look at the street pattern and where we can maximize the number of spaces for visitors parking. In addition to that, we also have the benefit of the capital project for the town for 6th line to complement those within the subdivision. With regards to your comment related to the previous applicant, I believe you're referring to the Argos subdivision application where they wanted to use the on-street parking as part of their reduction in their mixed-use building. And that's where I had difficulties with the reduction in parking. It has always been assumed that the residential component, the visitors component, and the commercial component should take care of itself within the, and then everything above and beyond that from the street perspective complements the rest of the subdivision, as opposed to allowing for the benefit of the mixed-use building to use just the on-street parking.
Thank you. Very well. I agree. And thanks for clarifying that. And then I just was hoping you could expand a bit on the North Park Boulevard extension to 6th Line, because we do get a lot of questions from residents on that. And, you know, I see that staff has indicated that there does need to be timing and coordination, and 6th Line reconstruction has already started. And I was wondering, do you have any indication of whether that portion of 6th Line needs to be completed in order for the North Park extension to begin, or North Park needs to be completed first in order, like, what would be the timing of that? Do we have any information?
Through your Mayor Burton, I don't have any information at the present time, but the construction of North Park Boulevard eastward towards 6th Line will be part of this draft plan of subdivision. The interesting part on this one also, there's a bridge that has to be built for the extension of North Park just before 6th Line. So there needs to be a very big coordination effort between the developer and our capital project and the timing of how the subdivision works.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Chisholm, you're next.
Thank you, Worship. My questions are in alignment with respect to the previous discussion about roadways. With these developments coming in, these subdivision developments, Rob, with respect to Burnenthorpe and 6th Line, are these roadways going to be expanded, widened at the same time simultaneously, or are they done prior to the development going in? As you know, Burnenthorpe Road is basically a country road in itself at this point in time, unless it's changed in the last month or two. My concern is that the consideration, because of all the traffic and roadway difficulties up there, if that is done prior to it or simultaneously, and also looking at if it's widening again with the parking, looking at that as part of the reconstruction of those roadways. Can you comment on that?
Through your worship to Councillor Chisholm, the 6th Line capital project is well underway. We are looking at, I believe, 60% design drawings at the present time to ensure that we have lanes of traffic, landscaping, lay-by parking. There's areas for the poles, the trees, and whatnot that are associated with 6th Line will get widened. It will be a 2-lane road each direction, so there's 4 lanes of traffic there, plus turning lanes. So it's going to be a much bigger road than you see right now. The big effort right now is trying to get that roadway initiated before Trafalgar Road, Regions Road, gets under construction. So once again, there's a coordination effort, not only by ourselves, but also with the development industry.
Thanks, Robert. Appreciate it. As part of the report back, can we have some kind of statement or paragraph or a page with respect to how the coordination is going to happen with these roadways and these developments? Just to give everybody a heads up on how this is being developed, in hopefully in the appropriate way that does not create traffic problems or issues with even with the developers of the town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just
Councillor.
one further comment for Councillor Chisholm. When council dealt with the MGO, or will be dealing with MGO, I believe this later on tonight, there is a clause or recommendation related to initiating advanced discussions to obtain lands and whatnot that we need for construction. So those discussions are already happening with regards to the construction or the reconstruction of 6th Line.
There's an opportunity for you later, Councillor Chisholm. Councillor Elgar, you're next, and then Councillor Robertson.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Burton. Rob, going back to parking. So you've got 22 detached dwellings. Now, they would have basements. Is that the plan when I see detached?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. At the 14 semi-detached, will they have basements?
I would assume they would.
The 21 townhouses, are they they're slab on grade?
At that point, I don't know that, but I would assume there may be a basement associated with that too. Very small, but there may be. But I can confirm that in the recommendation report.
Yeah, because a lot of times what I've noticed is happening when it's townhouses and they're slab on grade, that small one parking spot that's supposed to be in the garage becomes everybody's basement storage area, or at least a great majority of people. So when we say there's 2 parking spaces, I know there are, but somehow something gets missed when that happens, because people move in and they got 2 vehicles and they can't park them because they just don't have room to put all their other stuff in the house. It's out in the garage, that's why I'm concerned with the slab on grade, cuts out a parking spot. So yeah, if you could just find that out, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Very well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Robertson.
I'm going to follow in the path of Councillor Hazlitt-Beale and ask for the environmental building codes to be enhanced as great as possible in this build in terms of your recommendations and your issues you're listing. I think that we can't keep falling back on the Ontario Building Code as our only way to promote this message. And if we can get some enhancements, even them to think about permeable driveways and things like that, that would be a great step forward.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you very much. I'll take that as a direction.
All right, Mr. Charles, are you ready to provide us with the amplified list for this report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. The additional items that I had heard this evening is to provide council with an overview of the coordination with widening of existing roads as well as new roads, how the timing will be worked out amongst the town, Halton region, and the development industry, as well as work with the developer regarding what climate change initiatives can be incorporated into the design of the subdivision, and identify construction materials for new buildings that will help address climate change issues.
Thank you, Mr. Charles. Councillor Palmer, being your ward, or Councillor Sanju, being your ward, would one of you like to move the report? Councillor Sanju moves the report. Is there an objection to the motion? Madam Clerk, there being no objection, the motion carries. Council, we've come to the 3rd public meeting report. This is Smart Centers on behalf of Smart REIT, the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications for 294 Hayes Boulevard and 271 Oak Park Boulevard. And as before, this is an issue collecting session, not a deciding session. And people who are interested in delegating, and we have a few already, can call 905-815-6095, and we'll connect you to the meeting, and you'll be called upon to speak following the previously listed, the already registered delegations, of which we have 3 or 4. Now, we are going to turn this over to our senior planner, Trish Collingwood, who's been hard at work on this file for quite some time. I know because I get copied on a lot of the public input that she's been fielding. Trish, you have the Zoom floor.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Good evening. The purpose of this presentation is to introduce you all to the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by Smart Centers on behalf of Smart REIT in conjunction with the required statutory public meeting. As noted by my staff report, there are no decisions to be made at this time, and the staff report is to be received by council. I'd like to make note of and apologize for the incorrect file number that appeared in the notice and in my staff report for this meeting. The file number is not 1413.31. It is 1413.34 as shown on this slide. An amended notice did go out identifying the correct file number. And as always, if you're interested in speaking to this item, please call in at 905-815-6095. Next slide, please. The applicant has submitted an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment application to permit a mixed-use development consisting of a 5-story podium and 2 residential towers at 28 and 29 stories with at-grade commercial uses. The applicant is proposing a total of 585 residential units, 8 of which are considered at-grade townhouses, that will be facing Trafalgar. The development will also create 493 parking spaces within 4 levels of above grade parking that is incorporated into the building, so not underground. 590 bicycle parking spaces are also located within the building and in the parking structure. I'd wanted to point out that prior to submitting the application, the applicant did host a virtual public meeting on April 8th, this spring. There were 28 members of the public in attendance, and the notification for that meeting went beyond the 120 meters that we typically use, and that was the applicant that did that on their own accord. And from the town's perspective, we have also extended our notification area to, and I'm sorry, I don't have the map available, but that we did extend it to incorporate all of the Uptown Core, as well as extending across Trafalgar Road to the residents on the other side, the east side of Trafalgar Road. Next slide, please. The subject lands are located within the larger Smart Center land holdings that includes the Walmart and the Superstore, as well as all of the other commercial businesses there within the Uptown Core growth area. The property has a lot area of approximately 0.9 hectares and is located at the northwest corner of Trafalgar Road and Oak Park Boulevard. The surrounding land uses include the Keg restaurant and other one-story commercial uses to the north, Trafalgar Road, and a wide range of one-story commercial uses to the east, Oak Park Boulevard, Oakville Chrysler, and a 12-story residential building to the south, and to the west is Taunton Road and a 4-story commercial office use building. Next slide, please. So I want to take a couple slides just to talk about the evolution of the Uptown Core. I think it's important here. As you can see, this is a 1995 ortho photo of the Uptown Core, and I believe it is the last ortho photo taken that the town has prior to the construction of the Walmart and the Superstore, which came like a couple years later. So in 1987, an official plan amendment 14 provided direction for 3 development areas within the Uptown Business Core. These areas looked at commercial, cultural, institutional, and recreational uses. It was considered a new area for the town of Oakville, a new heart to the town of Oakville north of the QEW that would provide locations for high and medium density residential development. The intent was a strong, coherent urban image that included a staged growth pattern, some streetscaping plans, pedestrian connections, and was intended to have year-round, day and night active uses for this area. Next slide, please. In 1995, the Uptown Core Urban Design Study was completed, adhering to the policies that I just spoke about, or the policies that came out of OPA 14. In this study, they refined the development block pattern, the street network, the distribution of land uses, the provision for parking, and identified some of the special features within the Uptown Core. The new land use structure identified a business district, a central retail area, and locations for medium and high density residential development. I think what's interesting in this one is you can see a lot of the high density residential is the red. And so as we go through the slides, you'll see how that's moved, that shifted towards the arterials. But this, in 1995, this is how the plan came about. And the red along Trafalgar Road is partially the town's former public works site. Next slide, please. In the late 90s, the Uptown Core staff completed a community streetscape master plan for the Uptown Core, as well as an Uptown Core Main Street buildings architectural review, which strictly dealt with the architectural massing along Uptown's Main Street, so Oak Park, and to demonstrate what the existing policies would physically translate into built form. Through this study came the policies that looked at reduced setbacks, building massing, and placing surface parking behind the buildings along Oak Park Boulevard. Again, most of the residential is off of Dundas and is not located on Dundas and Trafalgar. It's pushed back between Oak Park and Glen Ashton for the most part. Next slide, please. In 2005, and re-looking at the official plan, Part E for the community district and special study area plans, building on OPA 14. The policies were put forward that positioned the Uptown Core development framework as a regional center with emphasis on commercial development, a civic and public presence, and mixed-use development to encourage the integration of various daily activities. High and medium density residential uses, again, were planned within the core, and policy spoke to eliminate large-scale surface parking. Population targets were included within the policies, and looking at where to start moving some of that density throughout the core. Next slide, please. So you can see here things are starting to shift. During 2008 and 2009, the town was developing the livable Oakville plan that we have and use today, and the identification of primary and secondary growth areas within the town for locations to direct intensification to and away from established neighborhoods. This resulted in multiple background studies to support the Uptown Core review, which included extensive public consultation. And during that comprehensive review, which I'll say was the last comprehensive review of the Uptown Core, but during that review and the rest of the other growth areas, the introduction of the mixed-use land designations were brought forward and put into place on lands along Dundas Street and Trafalgar Road, which were later designated higher order transit corridors. The 2009 work envisioned that high non-auto mode splits for Uptown Core lands can be achieved here. There's a comprehensive network of sidewalks and cycling facilities, transit services, there's a transit terminal, the future HOV, so high occupancy vehicle lanes and or the bus rapid transit lanes along Dundas and Trafalgar Road that the region was starting to plan back in the 2009, 2010. And to some extent, existing and future levels of congestion were looked at to encourage that shift change that we need to see in order to get people to start looking at transit or other modes. That all began happening in 2009 and on. In addition, there's the integrated planning and transportation vision that has incorporated the mix of uses for the walkable streets and the recommended inclusion of lower parking ratios and shared parking arrangements within the mixed use developments. And I just would point out the different colors. You can see bonusing starting to come in here along Dundas, Trafalgar, and then along the Oak Park and throughout this core, the middle spine there, along, I think it's Oak Walk, sorry. Next slide, please. So instead of developing outward, the town started looking at the best approach for managing development within the town's existing boundaries. And in 2017, council approved the town's urban structure as shown on the screen. The urban structure, it was recently implemented into the official plan by OPA 15, and it provides for nodes and corridors where higher intensity forms of mixed use growth that would support frequent transit service are to be accommodated. You can see the nodes you see the corridors identified along Trafalgar Road and Dundas, and the nodes of the Uptown Core circled there. And these areas will accommodate intensification through development and redevelopment, and corridors such as Trafalgar Road and Dundas Street were identified as transit priority corridors. At the time of the approval, the town-wide urban structure was deemed to be consistent with the provincial policy statement and conform to the regional official plan and the growth plan. Next slide, please. So coming up to speed with livable Oakville plan today, as I said, the subject lands are located within the Uptown Core growth area. The site currently is split is currently split in the urban core designation, which is the highest of the most intense of the mixed use designations. That's at the north end of the parcel. And the Main Street designation is at the southern end of the parcel on Oak Park. An intent for this area is like it's primarily focused to be higher mixed use, higher density development, similar to what we're seeing in Midtown and Palermo. These are the primary growth centers, and looking to locate the intensification in these growth areas to avoid the spillover into the neighborhoods. Section 21 of the Livable Oakville Plan states that the Uptown Core will function as an urban community with an emphasis on mixed-use development that supports pedestrian-oriented and transit-supportive development and redevelopment. The policies and objectives for the Uptown Core include promoting high-density forms of residential and mixed-use development by coordinating land use, transportation infrastructure, and urban design. Next slide, please. This schedule out of Livable Oakville shows the heights. So again, as I mentioned, the site is split, and you can see it here. The site is split from the medium brown to the mustard color. And the Main Street 2 along Oak Park has a current height limit of 4 to 6 stories. And the urban core is from 12 to 16 stories. Both of these designations on this block are eligible for bonusing, which would allow an additional 4 stories. So the urban core block, the brown, could look at a height of up to 20 stories with bonusing if that were deemed appropriate, and up to 10 stories on the Main Street 2 lands. Policies within the Livable Oakville state that the Uptown Core shall evolve and transition in a way to not preclude or undermine the long-term vision for high-density mixed-use development and incorporate urban design policy requirements as set out in Livable Oakville. So looking at ways to support the integration of the transit along Trafalgar and Dundas, and incorporating that into the intensification ideas for this area. Next slide, please. So looking at where some of the studies are going for the future state of Uptown Core, I just want to point out 2 significant ones. So Metrolinx Dundas Bus Rapid Transit Study, it's ongoing. I feel this is where we're going in Uptown Core. It's becoming more evident from the direction from the province with regards to integrated land use planning and transportation planning for the multi-use corridors. This is evident with the Dundas BRT work that's progressing and is in alignment with the provincial policy directions. The BRT corridor on this slide is highlighted in the red, and I dropped a red star there just north of that, just south of the red line to show where Uptown sits. The subject lands do front onto Trafalgar Road, and for Trafalgar Road is also identified in the Metrolinx 2041 Regional Transportation Plan as a bus rapid transit route. The 2041 plan uses the Growth Plan 2017's planning horizon for 2041 and sets out a series of goals and strategies to complete the delivery of current regional transit projects, integrating transportation and land use in prepare for an uncertain future. Several staff members, including myself, are active members of the Dundas Bus Rapid Transit Study that's facilitated by Metrolinx. And this includes Halton Region in coordinating with the other municipalities and the region on looking at the successful completion of these facilities for Oakville and GTA residents. Some of the facts, some of the little tidbits that come out of this study is that there typically are 110,000 new residents every year moving to the GTHA. And a lot of the problems that we're all experiencing in the growth of our communities, the steady paced growth with has not been matched with reliable public transit, and that's what Metrolinx is looking to do in securing the facilities and the recommendations and the buy-in from all of the municipalities to work together towards the Dundas BRT. As part of as the second one I wanted to highlight was the town's official plan review. So the growth areas review is examining and updating the policies introduced through Livable Oakville in 2009 that guide development related decisions in the Uptown Core. So everything that was done in 2009 is being looked at again. This study was initiated in 2018. It took a slight pause and is underway again, and should be fully recommencing later this year. It will be looking to align all of the existing policies and looking to realign them with the PPS growth plan and Halton Region's integrated growth management strategy to make sure that everything is in alignment with provincial direction. And for those members of the public that are watching tonight, I did put the link up there. However, if you go into the town's website and just type in Uptown Core Growth Area Review into the search, it will bring up a bunch of links. Click on the first link and you can look, you can read about the study and find out how to become more informed. Next slide, please. So subject lands are zoned mixed use 2 and mixed use 4. Again, the site is split between the Main Street and the urban core designations that correspond in the Livable Oakville. And the mixed use zone permits a range of residential and non-residential uses, including apartment dwellings, long-term care facilities, restaurants, retail stores, and business offices, as well as other uses. Next slide, please. I just want to quickly walk through the site context with regards to recent approvals and construction underway. Also note that the proposed development is approximately 400 meters from the Uptown Core Transit Terminal, which is identified with the larger T on just north of the red star on this slide. And that's approximately a 3 to 4 minute walk to the transit terminal. The yellow stars on this slide are applications that have been approved or in various stages of approval. So some of them are newly submitted, but we're working our way through. They're mostly site plan applications, so they already have approvals behind them. And just to look at some of these, and I'm sorry with Zoom I can't highlight any of these that I'd like to, but if you take in if you look at the red star, which is the site we're talking about today, with a total of 585 residential units, 493 parking spaces, the site nets approximately, as it stands right now, about 650 units per site hectare. Just to the north, the yellow star to the north of it at the southwest corner of Dundas and Trafalgar is the Cortel development that we're all watching going up now. The four towers, the first one being 25 stories. So that development has the four, like I said, 25 stories, 17, 14, and 12 stories on that block. 750 units on that site, and that density comes in at approximately 300 units per site hectare. A little bit lower, and when you take off the land that was conveyed to the back, obviously the units per site hectare does go up, but that is a larger development in our town that's right up against the transit terminal. To the south of the red star is the Taunton, and that has a density of approximately 464 units per site hectare. A new application that's just come in, it's just down Dundas. It's the second yellow star to the east of Trafalgar. That is the Daniel site. Currently looking at that as 3 15-story buildings, and that has a density of 697 units. The yellow star to the north of Dundas on the west side of Trafalgar is 3064 Trafalgar, with a density of 860 units per site hectare. That we're still looking at the ultimate height of that, but it's proposed to be 230 stories. And the very northern star on the east side of Trafalgar at the very top is 3220 William Colson. It just received site plan approval and is under construction, and that has a density of 624 units per site hectare. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates the street level and pedestrian perspectives of the development from the corner of Trafalgar, up at the top there, and Oak Park Boulevard, as well as the bottom image is from the internal road, so looking from Taunton. These views illustrate the grade-related experience for a pedestrian, a cyclist, or from a vehicle. The 5-story podium will have active uses at grade in the form of 2-story integrated townhouse units, as well as amenity space and commercial space. The proposed retail space will be along Oak Park Boulevard, which is consistent with the Main Street vision for from livable Oakville. And both of the frontages will have direct access to the multi-use path along Trafalgar Road and the sidewalk on Oak Park Boulevard. Next slide, please. So the proposed height does exceed the height range permissions within livable Oakville to date prior to the Uptown Core growth area review, and therefore requires an official plan amendment to evaluate the appropriate heights on this site. The applicant puts forward, so their justification is that the development proposal for the subject lands is responding to provincial and municipal land use directions to assess opportunities within designated growth areas and corridors for intensification, and to efficiently utilize the sites they're proposing, as well as the frontage along the Trafalgar Road, which is a priority transit corridor. The applicant is requesting the height increases beyond what is currently available through the in effect land use designations in livable Oakville. So under the official plan, they're looking for amendment to increase the height permissions on the site. And in the zoning bylaw, they are looking to take the existing special provision 178, which identifies the mixed use 2 and the mixed use 4 designations, and to replace that with one designation, which would be the mixed use 4. They're looking at having some yard flexibility, obviously recognizing the heights that they're looking for. They would like to recognize the height of the mechanical unit as well. They're looking to include the dwelling units, permissions for at-grade dwelling units along Trafalgar Road, possibly Oak Park Boulevard, and then they're looking for reduced parking ratios and increased bicycle parking ratios. Next slide, please. So matters to be considered that I've identified to date include provincial and regional policy conformity with, I'm sorry, that should not say North Oakville, that should say livable Oakville plan policies. Looking at the healthy community objectives set by the region, the Metrolinx regional transportation plan and the planned BRT that we're undergoing the study of now, intensification objectives of the Uptown Core growth area, locational criteria for transit supportive development that would contribute to the town's transportation master plan goals and objectives, compliance with livable by design guidelines, development and redevelopment potential of surrounding properties. So looking at the development potential of the 1-story commercial uses that are there now, the contribution to the Main Street objectives and supporting and a transit supportive environment for pedestrians and cyclists, the evaluation of the at-grade townhouses, townhouse units that would be facing Trafalgar Road, evaluation of the Trafalgar Road and Oak Park treatment of the ground-related space to the public interface, justification for the proposed amendments, the assessment of the transportation impact through the transportation impact study, establishment of appropriate parking standards, appropriate travel demand management measures for this site, and a review of those, and alignment with the climate emergency declared by Council in June 2019. The next slide. So this is a fairly condensed, shortened list of the public comments that have come in to date. There's more that some of them fit into these themes, and I've captured, for the most part, the majority of comments. So concerns over the lack of park space in the area, especially since COVID. Radio tower signals, and this isn't something that I've just heard from residents. I've also heard this. We have members of the police department, the reviewer applications that come in, Coast Guard, and are also, looking at the impacts of this to their radio tower signals and what they will be doing in the future to mitigate that. Existing state versus future state of the surrounding neighborhoods, water supply, overcrowding, overlook from the towers, shadow impacts. And shadow impacts also looks at the shadow impacts not just to residential properties, where the greater amount of impacts are on the east side of Trafalgar, but also looking at shadow impacts to the canopy coverage in the area. Increased traffic through this part of town, in particular along Trafalgar and throughout the neighborhoods. Safety for pedestrians, increased noise and air pollution, light pollution, stormwater and flood management. The comments about the green roofs proposed in the high-rise developments are not enough to mitigate the loss of green space, vacant land, and wetlands. And how is the town responding to the application in light of the declared climate emergency? Next slide, please. Oops, sorry, next slide. Thank you. So in conclusion, staff put forth the following recommendation as shown for council's consideration, that the public meeting report prepared by the Planning Services Department dated September 1st, 2021 be received, that comments from the public with respect to the proposed official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment submitted by Smart Centers on behalf of Smart REIT Oakville be received, and that staff considers such comments as may be provided by council. And that includes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Collingwood, for that very thorough report. Council, I would propose to hear from the delegations next. Is that suitable? Thank you. And I wonder if, I didn't catch the number, but Ms. Collingwood, you had a slide that I thought captured many of the public comments we've already received. Can you get that one put up for us during the delegations?
Yeah, if you go back just one slide from my recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Madam Clerk, would you call the first delegation? And for the public, I've had this put up to assist you. If your issue is already recognized, you might want to spend your time adding to the list rather than repeating what's already on it. And it's up to you. It's your time, and we're here to help. So, Madam Clerk, the first delegation.
The first listed delegation is Francis Borges.
Ms. Borges, welcome. Council looks forward to your information. And please remember to unmute yourself if you haven't already. Francis, are you there?
Hello?
Hello.
Can you...
Thank you for coming. We
thank
hear
you.
you very well, thank you. Please share your information with council.
Yes, sure. This is my first time listening to it. I just got the notice. I am one of the unit owners on Oak Park. Seems like the bicycle numbers for storage is a lot from each proposed builder. And honestly, with our Canadian weather, the bicycle number units to store them, while they sound great, but in practicality, there's definitely going to be a real car parking issue. And I've noticed from our building in the past is people will come into the guest parking, the visitors parking, and park overnight, because high rises are notoriously deficient in offering multiple vehicle parking. It's just the way it is. So to have a 28, 29-story building, it's just too tall, in my opinion. So thank you. Those were the 2 points. The bicycle is only good for seasonal, and it's going to create quite a bit of traffic issue. So thank you.
Thank you very much for the time you took to listen and to bring your comments. Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation?
The next delegation is Wanda Crichton.
Good evening. Ms. Crichton, is it? Welcome to the meeting. Council looks forward to your information. Please remember to unmute yourself if you haven't already.
I got a new prompt. Good evening, councillors, Mayor Burton, planning staff, and fellow residents. I'm going to go over some points that have already been raised. I know you've had a terribly long day, but I'm going to ask you to bear with me and let me go through the presentation. I'll be happy to answer your questions. Some of you may know, my name is actually Wanda Crichton, and I want to make you aware that we have some very serious reasons as to why we're objecting to this. They are not frivolous. I'm putting a formal objection because the letters that I get from the town clerk say you have to do that. These objections are not frivolous, and I want you to know as well, we know that development is going to happen. Ms. Collingwood walked us through that. Our issue here has to do with the height and the density. Next slide, please. One of the key problems here has to do with storm and wastewater management. The report submitted by this developer, quite frankly, says that it will exceed the existing sewer infrastructure capacity as the lands south are not vacant. So this is going to result in sewage and flooding. Basically, they're saying that we can build our 2 towers now, but that's only because the lands vacant or south of there are vacant. Well, they're not. The town has already approved development of parcel 7, and the rest of the vacant land is for sale. So therefore, the current and future sewage capacity does not exist. They're talking about some type of holding tank, which does not negate the fact, even in their report, it will still exceed this future sewer infrastructure capacity. The nature, location, cost, maintenance, and impact to residents of such a tank and to Morrison Creek isn't considered. Town has always recommended using storm management ponds, which are consistent with a green environment and what is in use already in our area. There's an issue of potential pollution as well, as discharge to a creek. I quote from the functional water report, page 53, part of some correspondence to the town, and it quotes, "This system outlets directly to a downstream creek." Next slide, please. The town has declared a climate emergency with flooding as a main risk. The town policy recommends water balancing with new developments. And that I found out is all the mitigating factors for climate change that I believe one of our councillors already indicated. Approving this bylaw change and application increases the sewer flood risk, goes against the town policy, and further endangers residents and our properties in the area. Frankly, I don't want sewage backing up in my basement because you authorized this particular development as presented. I checked the town's stormwater management master plan, and it doesn't include this area or Ward 5, 6, or 7 that I can see. Why? Flooding is a danger in our areas and on this proposed sites. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. Traffic and parking, you already received a lot of written submissions about this. My concern is the information about the traffic here, there's no data source of where this data is coming from, whether it actually includes the massive developments that Tricia already pointed out are occurring north and possibly south and west of here. So I don't even know if it's counting everything you've already approved. 2 intersections in the area adjacent to this proposed development are identified as already exceeding town traffic volume standards. This, as proposed, is only going to make it worse. I submit that the intersection of Rose Gateway and Trafalgar will also be exceeded, as it's only 1 block south of Oak Park and Trafalgar, and that's one of the problematic intersections identified. I don't cross Trafalgar Road. It's dangerous. I stopped doing that 2 years ago, and I've lived here for over 19 years. We already have excess traffic, speeding, and noise in our area. I submit an updated independent traffic study is needed prior to any decision. Next slide, please. Next slide. We've talked about parking. More overflow traffic and parking will spill into our streets, which is already a problem as identified in the written submissions you've already received, and we've heard that from a resident. My other issue is the hundreds of above ground parking spots, in my view, pose a health and safety risk to us as residents because they increase air pollution. All these cars are going to be idling, particularly in the winter, and we are going to experience more noise because they're going to be entering and exiting at all hours of the day and night. From what I can see, there's no electric parking spots, yet manufacturers say all the cars will be electric by 2030. Next slide, please. I'm just giving you a photograph. This is a picture of Rose Gateway, which is immediately opposite, by the way, Trafalgar Road. Unfortunately, Tricia's slide can't be put up, but I wanted to show you the location. Directly across Trafalgar Road, between Oak Park and Glen Ashton, is our residential neighborhoods of several streets. Next slide, please. Shadow and night pollution. Shadow study that's included here is incomplete. It does not include an impact of all the types of shadow already existing properties. This will ruin the use of outdoor living space, especially on parts of Penrose and Rose Gateway with massive shadowing because of the proposed height of these towers. There's also no consideration of light pollution in the night sky created by this for residents facing northwest. Nor is there anything to consider night flying for birds, migratory birds which come up and down our creek valley here. I also contend there's no evaluation of the shadow impact of the diminished light on existing tree canopy on our streets, which the town's environmental policy said is critical for managing climate change. So the trees on our streets are 19, 20 years old on mine. They're older on some of the other, but they've been used to these light conditions. I don't know what the impact is if you start shadowing them. Mature ash on our streets are already lost. Next slide, please. Next slide. Hello, next slide, please. Can we have the next slide, please? Oh, there it is. Thank you. Sorry. Okay, I'm showing you a picture of Penrose and Rose Gateway. Please leave this on the photo. If you look to the immediate left of this photo, you'll see a home with trees to the left of it. If you peek between the roof and the trees, you will see a bit of a roof. That is the Taunton. That is a building, which I'm not even sure, it's about 10 to 12 stories. It's in what is the actual approved official plan prior to any bonusing. So when you look at that picture, what I'm trying to illustrate is that the proposal here is talking about putting something above that tree line 2.5 times the height of the Taunton. It will totally fill the sky, hence we're getting into all the shadow and lighting issues. Those homes, if you look at that corner and to the right, their living spaces are behind their homes. So that's the western sky. So basically the shadowing that's going to happen is going to occur at the time they're wanting to use their outdoor space the most, afternoon and early evening, as the western sun will be blocked by these proposed towers. This isn't in keeping with livable Oakville and creates an eyesore incompatible with surrounding area residential properties. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. Next slide again, please. Next slide. Thank you. So there are many other issues that have been identified. There's no green space with this proposal, and existing parks and trails are already crowded at peak times. I'm not even clear if there's any outdoor space in these units. There isn't an assessment of the increased air pollution we've talked about, noise pollution, light pollution at night, or the full impact of all shadows on area residents in the day. We have hugely increased danger due to pollution and noise with more traffic, which is already problematic in our area. There's no regard for the existing infrastructure capacity by the developer's own admission, because the lands south are not vacant. You've approved one development already, and you're planning more. So this is a huge health and safety risk and flooding risk. There's also no consideration of here is how this is all going to impact the water pressure in our houses. I'd like to turn on the tap and still have a good flow of water. My last slide, next slide, thank you, is just say no. What I'm asking you to say no to is the height, scope, and density of this development. It's not in keeping with the plan that you have alluded you already approved. And bonusing is completely inappropriate for the reasons I've tried to show you. This isn't in any way compatible with livable Oakville or fighting the climate crisis the town has declared. It's not green, it's not family friendly in any way. Restraining already existing services like parks, trails, rec centers, and schools. I believe that the plan to rely on transit really needs to have another look because of the impact of the pandemic. We've had poor use of Oakville Transit up until now, and all transit use following the pandemic, I'm not so sure it's returning or will ever get to levels that were predicted in any municipality. This proposal as it stands is incompatible with the nature of existing neighborhoods that have been here for 20 to 25 years, immediately opposite on the east side of Trafalgar Road and some of the homes in the whole Oak Park area. Proving this as recommended will create a concrete jungle and endanger the health and safety of area residents for the reasons I have highlighted. Thank you very much for listening. It's appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing your information, and Council and I appreciate the work you obviously put into it. Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
The next delegation is Malcolm Fernandez.
Mr. Fernandez, welcome. Council looks forward to your information, and please remember to unmute yourself if you haven't already.
Good evening, your mayor, and good evening to all the councilors and to all the guest speakers. I was really impressed with the previous speaker, and I know that in the last, I'd say 5 years, the climate crisis is no longer a crisis, it's a reality. We have seen the level of rainfall coming. I remember one number of years ago, it would happen maybe every 3 years. Now it looks like it's happening every 5 years. For some reason, Oakville has been spared, but I'm sure that the day will come when it will overwhelm our current sewage systems. I have concerns regarding the proposed height. It seems that every time we do planning, there's always amendments regarding the zoning. A number of years ago, I attended the council session prior to COVID regarding the condo development at Dundas and Trafalgar. And at that time, there was a debate going on regarding the height restrictions. I think at the time there were 3 councillors that had concerns regarding the height restrictions, but a majority of the council did not. The same thing is happening again with this proposal. It does not fit into the long-term livable plan of the town of Oakville. The fact that you're still calling it the town of Oakville. I drive along Burnenthorpe and Highway 10 in Mississauga, and it's almost like being in downtown Toronto. Is that what we're looking for, is to duplicate the city of Mississauga? Regarding the climate issue, what is the level of emissions that's going to be generated by the number of cars? So far, with nobody on this council, with the exception of one, will discuss the level of emissions that will be generated. We have a current government, federal government, that wants to reduce emissions. And in 2019, you passed a resolution regarding a climate emergency. Yet the previous councillor describing the new zoning for a 6th line, there was no discussion about how we're going to mitigate emissions. Are we going to plant more trees? The fact that the previous guest speaker described the level of water that would be increased exponentially from a 60-story tower, basically split into 2, but it's basically 60 stories. So you can imagine the level of water that's going to be used. I'm sure it will affect the pressure of the resounding residents. My most concern is these constant amendments. I live in the Oak Park area, and the level of noise has increased. The towers that were built north of Dundas and Oak Park is actually like a sound barrier. It generates noise. Before it was just farmland. Now I can understand we need to have people living in Oakville. We need to increase our population, business, but at the same time, the level of noise has increased exponentially. The final thing is regarding transit. Nobody in this council has even discussed future transit planning coming north to south. Now we just, or will be completing the widening of Trafalgar from QEW all the way to Dundas, but there has been no discussion from the planning committee regarding a future light rapid transit zone. It seems like we're stuck in this 1970s type planning. Where I live in Oak Park, the number of green areas has been substantially mitigated. We have limited use of the green zone. Currently, the Memorial Park area, I'd say 80% of it is not even being utilized for recreation. So my concern is that if we allow this new amendment, that it will set a precedent for other areas, and we'll be left with a series of 60-story towers in future. While we have available land near the GO Transit area, I think a number of years ago I had this discussion with the mayor, and he indicated to me that a lot of the land is still owned by the province. So when it comes to the housing crisis, these are the issues that we need to tackle now. We should be focusing on a livable strategy and not just focusing on height restrictions. It has to incorporate transit. This location should actually be closer to the Walmart area. It's a bit of a walk. I can imagine in wintertime or a heavy rainstorm, not many people will walk all the way to that transit hub. It's a bit too far. We need a dedicated transit line along Dundas, along the Trafalgar corridor. So that's the last point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the time you took to bring your information to council. Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
Our last listed delegation is Nolan Moss, and then we have 2 phone-in delegations after this.
Terrific. Mr. Moss, welcome to the meeting. Council looks forward to your information. Council, as I understand it, Mr. Moss is with Smart Centers and has a presentation for us.
Hello, everyone. Good evening.
Thank
you, Mayor Burton, and members of council for hosting this public meeting tonight. I would also like to thank staff for their thorough review and detailed presentation of the application. And would also like to thank the members of the public who came and joined tonight to provide their comments and thoughts on the proposal. While we did have a presentation for tonight, I'd like to avoid any repetition. Staff touched on a lot of the issues we were planning to speak to, so I think we will forego that presentation and just simply make ourselves available for questions and look forward to taking back any and all comments from tonight.
Well, thank you very much for your consideration. As we've explained, this is a issue collecting meeting, not a decision meeting, and council doesn't discuss various issues. In the interest of hearing from the public, we don't use the talk time. We talk later at the recommendation meeting, and we also speak by policy. Council, do you have any questions for the gentleman, or shall we turn to our phone delegations? Thank you, Mr. Moss, for your time and your consideration, and we'll see you again, I'm sure. Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation?
The next delegation is Susan Carey.
Ms. Carey, welcome. Council looks forward to your information. And please unmute yourself if you haven't already.
Hello. Good evening, Mayor Burton and council members. I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak to this issue before you. And I had one general question that came out of what Tricia said. And are there any residents of this area, especially the Oak Park area, on the bus rapid transit study group? If not, why not? And because they're the ones who know how these things are going to impact them. I don't understand why they want to put a 28 and 29-story tower in such a small area on that fronts onto streets that don't have the ability to be widened, unless, of course, you're planning on widening my street and coming through my living room. There's just not enough room. I think it would be, and I concur with the person who said this earlier, that it would be a terrible eyesore. It's totally out of character with the area that's built already. And I think that has to be taken into account. I'm worried about the grievous loss of farmland that we seem to be buying up and building on. Canada has some of the best farmland, and most of the Class 1 or the most versatile farmland is in the GTA and down and through the Niagara Peninsula and through our green belt. And once it's used for something other than farming, it can never be used for farming again. And Mark Twain said, you know, buy land, they ain't making it anymore. But this is really something that has me concerned because the environment is going to take a real hit. The pollution, as has been mentioned, the air quality and the water quality, there's no green space provided. I suggested in my letter that you should all have a copy of, that there should be looking at the flat roofs and putting community gardens and trees and bushes up there like they do in Europe. I mean, it works there. I don't know why it wouldn't work here. And there's no plan to increase the planting of trees that I saw. I don't know if you're aware, but since 1900, Ontario has lost 97% of its tree canopy. And this is terrible. We need to be bringing it back up because the trees are the lungs of the planet. That's what cleans the air. Is what keeps temperatures livable. And with all this concrete, it's just going to raise the temperature. And with the heat dome created, even though it'll be a mini one, it will create problems all the way around. We can't put all of the increase of population needed for Oakville into this one area. It's got to be spread out through the whole town, not just here. And I think that there needs to be some real rethinking about what it is we want and whether or not we intend to continue to have Oakville be livable, especially this area, which will be adversely impacted, in my opinion, by the arrival of these eyesores. And, you know, any of the green areas that are left, what will happen to them? Are they going to be built on? What about the Memorial Park up on near Trafalgar, where we hold the Remembrance Day ceremonies? Will that be built up? You know, the parking areas are already critical, and this will mean car overflow because there's no way those buildings will have enough parking spaces, and they will end up on the side streets that are already, you know, like for example, if you live here, you've got a garage, and if you need to evacuate your garage for something like you're having a repair done, for example, and you have to park on the street overnight, it's very hard to do that now because it gets really crowded. And I'm really worried about what that will mean with 600 more living units with cars in it. The pollution that will result from that, already medical studies are coming out. I have read a couple of them. These are credible. They're from recognized medical authorities, that pollution actually increases the rate of dementia and the risk of dementia in people. And here we have, on Oak Park Boulevard, a senior's residence backed on to a long-term care facility. On Glen Ashton, you have 2 schools and a daycare center. The potential for problems with increased traffic doesn't bear thinking about. And Trafalgar and Oak Park and Trafalgar and Glen Ashton are already areas where traffic accidents have happened. I have personally witnessed 2 of them, one of which resulted in the total destruction of both cars and injuries, resulting in people having to be taken to hospital. They want to bring in more bicycles, but it's too dangerous. The streets are too narrow. There's just no way. The health and safety of the residents is just not being looked at. I'm concerned about this, and I don't know why this isn't being taken into more consideration and why we're not making decisions based on long-term medical authorities. It just bothers me no end because, you know, it's going to adversely affect health. This is going to put pressure on the healthcare system and onward and onward. And so I think it needs to be looked at very carefully. 29 stories, 28 stories is just too high. This area has nothing that high. Nothing. And it doesn't need it now. The area is mostly built up, and none of it is that high. And I think we have to take into consideration the quality of life of the people who've already moved here and live here. You know, is their life going to be trashed because more of these buildings are being put in at the last minute? It seems to me we're going about this backwards. These big buildings should have been put in first and then built out from that rather than the other way around, because there's just no health and safety and environmental concerns being taken into account. I'm very worried about the impact of this on the environment. We've seen the climate disasters, and all the people I've talked to say that this is just the beginning and it's going to get worse because we're not doing the things we need to do. And I'm just concerned that we're not going to make good decisions in the long term, not just for right now, not just for the immediate gratification of whoever's going to benefit from this. And that's another thing that concerns me is, what commitment do the people who are building this have to our community? Are they just going to build it and walk away? Do they care what happens in future about the water, the infrastructure, the sewers? And I would like some answers to that. I would like them to be held to account for the pressure that they're putting on the infrastructure that we have, because I know my street, if you park, you can only have parking on one side, and if cars are parked there, it's impossible for two other cars to pass each other. One car has to pull back and the other come through and then go, the first car go through because there's not enough room. And there's no room to do anything about it. So I think that this has to be looked at very, very carefully. And I am totally opposed to a 29-story set of towers. That's just not where we need to go. I know that there are other buildings coming up, but the people in the town planning that I've talked to said that so far the highest one in the area is I think 15 stories or something. That's only half of what they want to put up. I can't imagine what it would look like with those two in an area where the buildings are all very low. And I think that they have to take into account where they're putting these things. They don't have the room to expand the roads, the infrastructure. And I think they need to think about this very carefully. And I want to thank the councilors and the mayor for accepting my letter. Hopefully you've read it, and for allowing me to speak this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Carey.
And I hope that that serious consideration will be given to reducing, maybe by half, the height of this building. I don't think we can take 29 stories.
Ms.
Thank
Carey,
you very much.
Ms. Carey, thank you very much for bringing your information and sharing it with us. And I don't mean to limit my comment on your remarks to only this, but I couldn't agree more with you, and most of council, I believe, wholeheartedly agrees with you. Life would be a whole lot better if the tall buildings went in first. And we have fought that battle and lost it many times. But thank you very much for your contributions tonight. Madam Clerk, could you call the next delegation?
Our last delegation for this issue is Ray Campbell.
Mr. Campbell, welcome. Council looks forward to your information. I can hear you, so you have definitely unmuted yourself. Welcome.
Thank you. You'll have to excuse me. I'm not as well prepared as some of the other people. I'm just now catching up with what's been going on and what's being planned for the neighborhood in which I live. I'd have to say that I am opposed to this development. I've yet to hear somebody who's come out and say that, yeah, we should go ahead and do this. This is a great idea. So the residents of this area have very patiently put up with the expansion of Dundas and the construction and disruption that caused. And once again, we're patiently enduring the widening of Trafalgar Road. Now, I'm presuming that these road widenings are part of the current official plan. And every time we amend the official plan and increase intensification, we will very quickly overwhelm the expansions we've made to make these roads bearable to drive on. Dundas, when it was 2 lanes each way, was very, very busy. I drove that every day for a while, and it was the worst part of my trip. So, the level of intensification that's going on here is above and beyond, I think, what this neighborhood should support. It certainly doesn't fit with the livable Oakville plan. I wouldn't call these buildings to be compatible with the existing context of the neighborhood. So that certainly doesn't fit. And the other thing is, in light of what we have all endured with COVID, I question the wisdom of such tall buildings, which could in fact become a viral incubator. I know the buildings on Central Park, which I believe are about 7 stories. And I know a couple of months ago in one of those buildings, there were at least 5 COVID cases. And number 6 at that time included my daughter, who contracted COVID visiting a friend there. So imagine 30 stories is going to be a real problem for future epidemics, and indeed COVID, if we're ever certainly through with it. Again, I haven't done a lot of research, but certainly there's research that's been done on the mental health and physical health of people in an overcrowded situation. And I'm concerned about increase in crime in the neighborhood. There's already been, drive-by shootings, and I've seen drug dealers on the street, and increasing the density of the population here would only exacerbate those things. So that's all I'm going to say for now. Like I said, I'm hoping that council will just say no. This is not compatible with a livable Oakville, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Campbell, for sharing your information with us. Madam Clerk, that ends the list of delegations. Thank you, everybody. Is it time to ask Mr. Charles for the additions to the issues list? Is the point of the meeting? Councillor Knoll.
Thank you. I have some additions to the to that list as well, if that's okay.
Well, it is perfectly okay. That's what we're here for. Councillor Grant, just let me answer. Councillor Grant's hand is waving. Let me see what he wants.
I think he's just saying hello.
Yes, I am, but I'll let Councillor Knoll go first, and I'll talk to the matter after that.
Very good. Ward councillors Knoll and Grant, you're first to add to the list.
Thank you.
Mr. Charles has his pencil sharpened and poised.
Thank you. First of all, I just wanted to, I just a little concerned about one of the comments that Mr. Campbell made at the tail end of his presentation about drive-by shootings. I can pretty much assure you, as both chair of the police board and councillor for the area, there's been no drive-by shootings. So I'm not sure where that information came from. I didn't want anybody worrying about that after the fact that might be watching council tonight. But I also just want to say a quick thank you to the staff for the work on this, particularly the decision to expand the notice radius. We've had issues in the past in the Uptown Core. I know some other areas in town too, where there's very little residential immediately around some of these developments, and especially when they're being proposed in commercial areas. And often cases, only a handful of people get the notice. So it was really nice that literally everybody in the Uptown Core on our side of Trafalgar Road got the notice, and which is evidenced by the number of people who have written and participated in tonight's meeting. So that's much appreciated, and I know Tricia felt strongly about getting that done with her team. I have a couple of points I just wanted to raise for the issues list. One of them is regarding economic development. Part of the section 21 of Livable Oakville, I believe it's I wrote it down here too, just for reference purposes. 2121D talks about the economic stability of the Uptown Core, and it talks about in the context of the mix of uses on the property. And I'm hoping that we can have an analysis of what a change of contemplated use on this land could do to the economic stability for the overall plan. I know we were certainly concerned about that way back in 2000 with the Chrysler dealership application on land that was designated for something else. And I'm concerned that, that could be an issue in terms of the economic viability of the area. Section 2121 talks about affordable housing as being an important component of any development application that takes place in the Uptown Core. And so I would hope that staff could address that and how we might incorporate whatever happens in this particular plan. I do know that our colleague, Councillor Mark, is going to talk about parking, I believe. So I won't, I won't raise those, so I'll let him do that. I'm very curious about the townhouses on Trafalgar. 2133 of the Livable Oakville plan talks about the fact that Trafalgar frontage should be office use. And this developer is proposing townhouses in a very commercial part of Trafalgar Road, and I'm very curious about the appropriateness of that. So I would like the staff to specifically, and I think that may have been on the list, and if it was, I apologize for repeating it. I'd also like to know if have we seen yet, and I know, I'm not going to talk about this, that's parking. I'll let Mark pick. I was going to ask the question about parking ultimately in a roundabout way, and I don't want to do that. And then the last thing is another one in 2121. I think it's B. It talks about the appropriateness of transitions across the various sections of the Uptown Core, that being Main Street, Central Business District, etc. So I would like some staff feedback on whether this is an appropriate transition of use in the Uptown Core to be considered as well. One of the delegates did talk about the electrification of parking spaces, and I would love to see some more commentary on that as we get further and further into EV usage, which seems to be growing by leaps and bounds every day. So that would be both a question of the accommodation of electrical vehicles as well as the infrastructure, providing the necessary electrical infrastructure to the building to not only accommodate immediate needs, but for the future as well. And then the rest of the issues, I think this is a fairly exhaustive list that is already going to be considered, including the appropriateness of heights, etc. So I'll leave that as is. So those are my additions to the list. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Grant. All right. Your colleagues are offering you a break at this point. I'll let you think about that while I turn to Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate the items that were brought forward for consideration by our staff already. I just want to, and I think the list is pretty comprehensive, including the height issues and all the other issues. I just wondered if staff could give the public any guidance on when this item will come back with the recommendation report that we'd be providing the responses to all the questions and issues that were raised.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Let me make sure that we've collected all the issues before we hopscotch away to another question. Councillor Grant, if you have further items to add, could I recommend that the staff will be open to written submissions? Councillor Knoll.
Thank you. Councillor Grant and I did speak about this earlier in the day, so perhaps I could just throw a couple of those issues on the list right now, and Councillor Grant could add any more later in writing if I can't adequately cover them. But I think we had a good chat and we were legion on a few of them already. I believe that one of the concerns is the reduction of parking space for the commercial zone. The commercial small businesses in that same block are already taxed with parking. So how will this impact those uses. So what allowance will be given for existing commercial uses and also for proposed commercial uses? Because we all know that in order to have a successful business, you need to have parking and it needs to be convenient for customers. So that's a concern that we have. So some, not just consideration about the parking at 0.6 per unit, but also consideration of the parking for the proposed as well as the existing business uses that this developer already owns and operates. So those were some of our parking concerns there. We've been hearing some concerns from some of the merchants there already, and we're just concerned this may exacerbate it. So we'd like some good discussion around that topic. One of the favorite things in North Oakville is to talk about parking. So no, it's no different this time.
Thank you very much, councillors. All right, Mr. Charles, before you give us your list, would you like to forecast when this matter might come back with a recommendation report? There's a time limit on these matters nowadays, isn't there? Maybe you could start with that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, I believe that the timeframe for this application will expire at the end of October. In terms of timing of bringing this back to council, that will be contingent on a number of things, including addressing the number of the issues that have been raised so far. I anticipate towards the end of this year would probably be a fairly good guess, and Trish can tell me if I'm entirely wrong on that.
For you, Mr. Mayor, I would like to aim for the end of this year, early next year.
Thank you very much. I hope that's helpful. Mr. Charles, are you ready to tell us what issues have been added? I thought Tricia's list was pretty comprehensive, and a lot of what I heard tonight, I thought she'd captured. But anyway, let's see what you got.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I would agree with you in a number of matters that the public had raised, as well as councillors, is in the list that is towards the end of the staff report. And I will identify that we're always willing to take more issues into consideration as they are raised by the public and or council. With those matters that I'd heard, which were in addition, included reviewing the functional servicing matters, for example, stormwater management and sanitary servicing, review the proposal in terms of being night sky friendly, determine whether there is sufficient outdoor and green space as part of the proposal, review the proposal in the context of potential noise increases, examine the potential of the mix of land uses and the effect that could have on the overall viability of the uptown area, identify ways in which affordable housing opportunities could be incorporated into the proposal, examine the appropriateness of a transition of land uses to adjacent properties, ensure there is sufficient electrical infrastructure to accommodate electric vehicles, and finally, how will the proposed reduction of parking spaces for the commercial zones affect the viability of commercial in the area for both the existing and the proposed uses?
Thank you very much, Mr. Charles. Councillor Knoll, as the ward councillor, would you like to move the report?
I'd be happy to do that, sir.
Thank you. Is there any objection to the motion? Madam Clerk, there being no objection, the motion's carried. The report is, with its additional information, is received. Council, you've been going at it for a pretty long time now. I'd like to suggest that everyone could benefit from a bio break. It's 9:15, I'm going to call it. Can I recommend that we resume at 9 o'clock? This is a best practice on Zoom meetings is to make sure that people have a little health break. And unless you object, I'm going to call that right now. I don't see an objection. We're recessed until 9 p.m. All right. Council is resumed after its recess in this long meeting. And Council, we have an item 7.3, a site plan matter with many delegations, and I estimate a very long amount of time for that. And I've been assured by the delegations that it will be. And so on the chance that you're satisfied with the balance of the reports on the agenda, I would like a motion from someone, Councillor Duddick, for the balance of the reports. So just to be clear, that's the recommendation reports 7.1 and 7.2, and the intent to, the notices of intent to designate for St. John's and Knox churches, and the Conservation District update work plan, and the Heritage Oakville Committee matters being the minutes and the permits for 187 Front and 105 Palliser. And is there any objection to the motion? Madam Clerk, I see none, and that motion is carried, and that allows us to move ahead to item 7.3, which is the recommendation report for the site plan application at 3194 Shoreline Drive, a matter that has had some contention and it has quite a history, and we're going to hear all about it. And for the benefit of the public, I thought it'd be useful to set out the ground rules under which council works when it comes to site plan. And so I'm just going to read the rules out for you. The site plan approval process provides an opportunity for a municipality to review specific technical details with respect to plans for development on individual sites. Site plan control regulates the development of the facilities, not the land use or operational issues. Land use is regulated through the zoning bylaw and includes matters such as height, setbacks, and parking requirements. Operational issues may be subject to other bylaws, including the town's nuisance bylaw or noise bylaw, but the site plan does not cover these things. And although the town invites members of the public to participate in the site plan process, and we welcome such input, it is important that the public understand that there is no public right of appeal from any decision, and this is a long-standing position of the legislature of the province of Ontario. So the matters to be shown on plans and drawings for approval are: 1, the location of buildings and works; 2, the massing and conceptual design; 3, the relationship of buildings to streets, other buildings, publicly accessible exterior areas; 4, interior walkways, stairs, elevators, escalators, to which the public has access; and 5, exterior design, when the official plan has policies with regard to that on the property, such as character, scale, appearance, design features, and sustainable design; and 6, sustainable design elements on adjoining highways, again, only where supported by official plan policies, such as trees, shrubs, hedge plantings, other plantings, ground cover, permeable paving, street furniture, curb ramps, waste and recycling containers on the adjacent highway. The topics for permitted conditions of approval are road widenings if required by an official plan, access to or from roads such as curbs, access ramps, traffic direction signs, loading and parking facilities, covered or uncovered, driveways and surfaces, walkways and pedestrian access where appropriate, accessibility for people with disabilities if appropriate, lighting, on-site landscaping, garbage and waste storage, and municipal easements related to watercourses, ditches, land drainage works, sanitary sewage facilities, and other public utilities of the municipality or a local board, and grading and drainage, such as disposal of storm surface and wastewater. All other matters in this particular case have been decided by the Ontario Municipal Board, which has been continued, I believe at the time of their decision, as the Land Planning, or the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, and is now calling itself, as I understand it, the Ontario Land Tribunal. But in any event, it's important to understand that council has no authority or power to overrule the tribunal by whatever name it goes by. The legislature is above us, and those are the provisions we work with. I hope that is helpful. And with that, I'm going to ask Rob Thun, our senior planner, to give us a presentation, and then we will call the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 or more delegations. Mr. Thun, you have the Zoom floor, and I hope I've helped start your presentation.
Thank you, Your Worship. You've actually scoped my presentation.
Oh, well, then we can just move on, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor Burton and members of council. The site plan application referred to council tonight is for the construction of a two-story detached dwelling at 3194 Shoreline Drive. The staff report can be found on page 251, item 7.3 of tonight's agenda. Slide, please. Thank you. The property is located on the south side of Shoreline Drive by the arrow west of Cudmore Road and abuts Lake Ontario. The town owns the lands between the subject property and the properties on the south side of Shoreline Drive to the lake. The photo on the right side shows the existing dwelling, which is proposed to be demolished. It is of a similar style to that what exists in the area. And that is a two-story dwelling with a garage that does project out the front. Slide, please. With regards, just some background information for council's information and the members of the public. In November of 2017, the site plan application was submitted. In March of 2019, the minor variance application was submitted. It was subsequently denied and appealed to the Ontario Municipal Board, LPAT. In October 19th of 2020, council passed a motion to refer the site plan application for consideration to council, which is the subject of tonight. The LPAT hearing did occur on October 21st, 2020, and rendered a decision on March 18th of 2021. And in that decision, it did grant the variances that were being proposed or requested by the applicant. The zoning for the site, as I said, was dealt with on March 18th, the LPAT decision. The decision stated also that development was to proceed in general accordance with the revised site plan and elevation drawings contained in the minutes of settlement. The full decision of the LPAT can be found in Appendix B to my staff report. Slide, please. From the site plan, as mentioned, it is a construction of a two-story dwelling, vehicular access via the existing driveway from Shoreline Drive. The proposed building floor area is 286 square meters. And as mentioned, the LPAT did grant a number of variances. These related to the private garage setback, 5.62 meters, the private garage projection at 4.06 meters, the rear yard setback of 6.36 meters, the residential floor area at 57.5%, and the lot coverage of 37.81. The proposal also before council, just so council gets a full appreciation of the zoning and the RFAs and coverages, the proposal before council also maintains existing setbacks of the required setbacks of 1.2 from the zoning bylaw, and also maintains the 9-meter height provision. So side yard setbacks and height are maintained as per the zoning bylaw. Slide, please. This slide shows the elevations of what the proposed house is to look like. Staff have reviewed these. Urban design staff have also reviewed these in relation to the Livable Oakville plan and the surrounding neighborhood, and has deemed them to be compatible, considering that the zoning has already in place through the LPAT process. Slide, please. From a landscape and canopy coverage perspective, the proposed tree canopy cover on this site is 55%, and that relates to the existing and the abutting trees. So the trees on the site and also the trees abutting the site. Fencing is proposed along the mutual property boundary of 3196 Shoreline Drive, which is on the south side or the bottom of the house as being proposed. Between the houses, it's starting at 2 meters high and decreasing to 1 meter high in the rear yard. That was to allow for views from the abutting neighbors to be maintained with a lower height. Additional perennials are being proposed around the pond that is shown at the rear of the property, abutting the shoreline. Regarding landscaping along property boundaries, the applicant is proposing hues. It's called Stonehenge skinny hues are proposed in this area. And my next slide, if council can, or if we can see the next slide, that's what a Stonehenge skinny hue looks like. Its height is 6 to 8 feet and width is approximately 1 foot. So that is what's being proposed on both property lines in the rear yards where the fences are being proposed. In conclusion, Your Worship, if we can have the next slide, keeping this short in light of the number of delegations that we have, staff are putting this recommendation forward for council's consideration, which is the approval of the revised site plan, authorization from for the clerk or the town clerk and the chief administrative officer to execute the site plan agreement with the landowners of 3194 Shoreline Drive in the town, and that the director of planning services, upon the agreement being signed and drawings being finalized, provide final site plan approval to this application. So, Your Worship, that is a very abbreviated presentation there. I look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Thun. I think you did a great job of setting the table for the discussion that's ahead of us. Council, before we turn to delegations, do you have any initial questions for Mr. Thun? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, I think it's time to hear the public delegations. First on our list is the applicant, Doreen D'Souza, David Horwood, and Russell Cheeseman, a solicitor representing them, I believe. Would you call into the meeting whoever it is that's going to speak for them? Mr. Cheeseman, I presume. Hello, I see David Horwood and Doreen. Do you know if your solicitor is going to be with you too or not?
Our solicitor is as well, so if you can join us.
All right, the clerk advises me that the Zoom says he's joining us now. There he is.
Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Cheeseman. I welcome you to the meeting. Have you guys drawn a straw to see who goes first? My job is just to welcome you.
Yes, sir. I would like to address council first, sir, just basically to say that this has been a very, very long process. I know my clients would like to address council as well, but I just want to point out to council that over this 4 to 5 year period that this site plan has been outstanding, and the fact that the matters of minor variance ended up at the Ontario Land Tribunal. We did not take, and we had the option to take the site plan to the Ontario Land Tribunal as well. We did not. We left it with the town of Oakville because we believed that once the issues of the variances had been dealt with, that we could work with staff to come up with a site plan that worked for the site, along with the planning staff and the legal staff of the town of Oakville. Those concerns, as you've seen, have all been worked out. You have a planning staff report before you this evening that we agree with. I know that Mr. Perlin has drafted the site plan, and I believe my clients have executed it already. So it's basically in your hands to deal with, but we have come through this long process, and we would like to thank you for the ability to speak to you this evening.
Thank you very much.
Now, Mr. D'Souza, I think, would like to put his 2 cents in.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Cheeseman. I think that's that's a very tight and concise summary of the situation. And Mr. and Mrs. Horwood, I understand you would like to speak. Please feel welcome to share your information with council.
Thank you, Your Worship. We wish to thank the mayor and councilors for the opportunity to speak regarding our site plan application. It's been 5 long years since we started this process of rebuilding our house, and we believe that we've been held to a higher bar. We've done everything that was required from us and more. We also have a signed agreement with the town and have received LPAT approval for our variances. It was not our intent to upset neighbors. We only wanted to build a house that we wanted on our property. And it is the right of any property owner and taxpayer to do the same. We were transparent with the neighbors regarding our intent to rebuild from the outset, and we fairly shared our plans with them. We've also made concessions along the way, but it doesn't appear to matter. They have continued to obstruct in a vexatious manner, which has negatively impacted on the neighborhood. If this behavior does not stop, we will have to seek other remedies. It is in everyone's best interest that our bill be completed as quickly as possible. We respectively request council and the mayor grant approval for a site plan application, and we thank you for consideration.
Thank you very much for your information. Madam Clerk, let's turn now to the next registered delegation. I'm going to welcome David Spencer. And Council, Mr. Spencer, as I understand it, has been delegated to speak on behalf of Audrian Weldon-Briggs, Shauna Kane, Linda Hatch, Elizabeth Penrice, and Michelle Spencer. And as I understand it, they believe that they need 10 minutes worth of time for each of them, and they've asked to delegate their 10 minutes to Mr. Spencer to present his presentation. Mr. Spencer, you have the Zoom floor for your presentation to council. Mr. Spencer, if you haven't unmuted yourself already, that's my friendly advice. Several of us have had opportunities to experience the you're on mute internet saying of the pandemic. In any case, welcome to the meeting. We're looking forward to your information.
There you go.
I hear you.
Do you have me on video?
I can't see your presentation and your video, and I think that's the same for everyone else, so it may not matter if we can see you. As long as we can hear you and see your material.
Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah, so I'm speaking on behalf of, I guess, 5 or 6, 7 different people. I'm not sure I'm going to need all the time, but I'd like to go through the process of why we're here and our concerns. So my name is David Spencer, and my wife Michelle and I live next door to the proposed new build at 3194 Shoreline Drive, Oakville, hereinafter referred to as 3194. The owners of 3194 have proposed a new build requiring 5 variances. There are 35 households in our neighborhood objecting to and only 6 supporting the proposed new build. 3 neighbors rescinded their support at 3194 when they realized that what 3194 told them, namely that the town was in support of the proposed new build, was not true. It should be noted that only 1 neighbor of the 10 houses on our portion of Shoreline Drive support the proposed new build. I have specific issues I would like to discuss regarding the proposed new build and how we got here today. When 3194 started communicating with the town planning department in 2017, their preliminary drawings were rejected at 39.63 lot coverage, 61% GFA, and increased garage projection of over 13 foot. 3194 arranged meetings with their local councillor and the planning staff. The counselor told us that 3194 felt that the planning department couldn't grasp, understand, or hear what they were trying to say. Obviously, the planning department did not buy into 3194's arguments for the variances. The same counselor met numerous times with the planning department, 3194, and possibly with their consultants and lawyer. Now, I think it is safe to say that a counselor that attends and engages in meetings with 3194, their consultants, planning, and planning director, his attendance could easily influence and put pressure on the planning department's decision making. In turn, we met with the counselor only once to voice our objections to the proposed variances for the neighborhood. We argued that his proposed new build would set a precedent for future oversized houses to be built on small lots in Bronte and throughout Oakville. I'd just like to add that I have never, ever called this home a monster home. The only people that have called it a monster home is my neighbors and their planner. Oversized, his advice was to get the neighbors to sign a petition, which we did. 35 neighbors, homeowners. We've actually, I think it was 37 now. There's about 80 houses in the neighborhood where we could have got more, but we thought that was plenty. 35 neighborhood homeowners have objected to the proposed new build in that petition. This is not an insignificant number of objections in our community, and the town should have an obligation to take notice accordingly. The proposed new build requires 5 variances: lot coverage, GFA, rear yard setback, garage projection, and private garage setback. We objected to 4 of these variances requested. The 5th variance is a reduced private garage setback, truly a minor variance in nature and opposed to other 4 variances. The town's approval of the 4 variances will allow for this new oversized house to be built on the smallest lot in our neighborhood, on one of the smallest lots on the lakefront in Oakville. To the best of my knowledge and research, the Oakville Planning Department has never supported a GFA increase of 14%, 43% to 57.5. This is 780 square foot increase, 34% on a GFA allowance of 2,300 square foot. The house's zoning today says you can have a house there on that lot, 2,300 square foot. They're asking for slightly less than 3,100 square feet. Nor have they supported a rear yard or less setback of less than 25 feet backing onto a lakefront parkland. Nor have they supported a front private garage projection of over 13 feet. When I say supported, I mean it hasn't been approved at Committee of Adjustment. I have not seen a house in Bronte, and I've looked at about 25 houses within a mile. Nobody has a projected garage. The planning report was submitted by NB1 planners on behalf of 3194, which spelled out the reasons why the variances for 3194 should be approved. The planner's submission said that the variances were in keeping with the neighborhood. I read the report thoroughly. It is 35 pages of inaccurate information, inappropriate assumptions, and comparisons. Here are some of the arguments that he put forward. If you measured 3194's lot size to the foot of the lake that he doesn't pay tax on, the lot coverage would be 22%. That's an interesting calculation. If you average the lot sizes in the area at, say, 7,500 square feet, the GFA for 3194 would be 41% of 7,500 square feet, which allows for their 3,075 square foot home that they wanted. However, 3194's lot size is 5,350 square feet, which is 40% smaller than the planner's average of 7,500 square feet. Their planner states that the neighborhood character and feel is defined by variability in lot size, building GFA, massing, and lot coverage. In other words, if one of my neighbors has a 3,080 square foot on a 7,500 to 8,000 square foot lot, of which we have many in our neighborhood, 3194 should be allowed to build a 3,080 square foot house on a 5,350 square foot lot, regardless of the impact on the neighborhood and on the immediate neighbors at 3190 and 3196 Shoreline. The planner's example is a house on the east side of Cudmore Road, number 20, that 3194 can see from their house. Therefore, 319's argument, they should be able to build the same house. That house is estimated between 33 and 3,500 square feet as the one built on 8,000 plus square foot lot. The planner states that there's nowhere accurately no way of accurately telling the GFA percentage to lot sizes are the homes in our neighborhood. This information is readily available from local realtors, real estate listings to Google, and I have samples of it in my other presentation. The planner stated that our local councillor and the planning department reached a consensus of allowing a 3,080 square foot house to be built. This is what he presented to the Committee of Adjustment. After I contacted the councillor, he stated that he did not approve the GFA of 57.5, but the planner did. The planner also states that the proposed new build were not significantly larger than the existing dwelling, 34% larger, 8% lot coverage, setbacks, rear yards at 8 foot in overall massing. The 2-story mass of the existing exterior wall of 3194 would increase by over 50%, and the 2-story mass of the existing exterior wall of 3194 would increase by 60%. The roof and slope angle of 3194 further increases the mass of the new build and blocks the sunlight and sky. The proposed new build garage projects over 13 feet rather than 5 feet that the bylaw allows. In the last 5 years, approximately 25 new houses have been built within 1 kilometer of 3194. From information I have gathered, all of these newly built houses complied with the bylaw outlined above. And I've got some photographs here. In fact, there are 3 new homes in our subdivision, one on Cudmore, one on Sandy Lane. Each one of those, and they're on 10,000 square foot lots. Each one of those have the garage inserted into the house, or no projection more than 5 foot. And from what I've seen anywhere in Bronte, and I think I've seen it in Oakville too, Oakville area, the garage projection just is not allowed. The owner of 3194 stated that if their property was in fact 7,500 square feet, they would not be in front of the Committee of Adjustment, as their proposed new build would meet the existing bylaw. Is this the basis of avoiding the existing bylaws by inserting an inaccurate lot size? A Committee of Adjustment member asked the planner if the owners cannot or will not conform to the present bylaws. He did not give a direct answer, the planner, except to say that 3194 wanted this size of house. Another committee member, and I believe that the Committee of Adjustment people or planners or lawyers are familiar with planning, described our neighborhood of 10 homes, which they did see, as having a distinct singular character, different than other homes where the road curves at the other end of Shoreline Drive, where the lots range from 8,500 to 15,000. 3194 is 5,350. Our neighborhood is unique and distinct. Allowing variances such as those proposed condemns our area to a tear-down neighborhood for years to come and will destroy its distinct character. And I might add, the planner used those words. We didn't tell them anything about the neighborhood. They came down on their own. Another committee member questioned the desire, and I find this very interesting. Another committee member questioned the desirability of taking an existing 2-story box house, brackets house, and replacing it with an 800 square foot larger 2-story box house when the existing house is already too big for the small lot it is on. It would not be allowed to be built today. And their planner actually said that also. In short, why would an even bigger house make any sense on the same small lot? Also, why was there no attempt to soften the mass box of the increased build? See Living Oakville talks about that in Living Oakville. Another point the same committee member made is that you cannot build a house with a protruding projection garage of over 5 feet today in Oakville. All members of the Committee of Adjustment had walked the neighborhood prior to the meeting and obviously understood our objections and the town's planning department initial reasons for denying the variances. Thereupon, on April 23rd, the Committee of Adjustment rejected all 5 variances. The town planning report submitted to the committee objected to 3, lot size, GFA, and garage projection. Obviously, the town did not think that the variances were minor in nature, or that 3194 met the 4 tests of minor variances and Living Oakville standards. The town's objections are outlined in detail in the town planning report dated April 23rd, The report clearly indicates the town's reason for denying the variances. After the town's refusal to grant the variances, the lawyer Russ Cheeseman and a second planner David Capper were retained by 3194 to appeal the town's decision to LPAT. Subsequently, we spoke to two lawyers regarding our position with respect to the appeal, but we believe that since the town was fighting the appeal, and they at the time they were, I wouldn't say anxious, but they were prepared to go to LPAT, no problem. And we ourselves were going to apply for party status. We thought we were in a good position to present our arguments as a party to the tribunal, along with the town planners and legal department. In the following months, I was in contact with Rob Thun to try and find out what was going on. The town planner responsible for 3194. I wanted to be kept up to date on what was happening regarding 3194. He always answered me as follows: "We are in discussions." I was copied on emails throughout the summer of 2019 and 20. These were between Dennis Perlin, the town solicitor, the LPAC coordinator, and lawyer Cheeseman. At all times, it was indicated that the town was going forward with a defense of its position at the tribunal, as scheduled. At that time, the correspondence shows lawyer Cheeseman was undecided whether the site plan would be part of the tribunal or dealt with at a later date. Was this a delay tactic by 3194? See the attached emails dated in July and in 2020, July 19th, 2019, and various ones in 2020. From Dennis Perlin to LPAC coordinator lawyer Cheeseman. Note the word ambush. We met with the town planners, the legal department, and local councilors twice, once in September 24th to discuss the status of the appeal, and again on January 30th, 2020, when we were told that the town had changed its 2019 position and was no longer going to oppose 3194 LPAT. The only thing had changed at that time was the lot coverage from 39.6 to, I guess it's 37.8. Eventually it got to 37.8. The reason given for this about face by the town was not that they were wrong in our objections or that the town agreed with the variances requested, but rather that the planning director didn't think they could win the case at LPAT. The exact email wording I received was staff are inclined to accept rather than proceed to a contested hearing at LPAT. Certainly not a ringing endorsement of the town's earlier position. It did not seem to matter that the only real change to the variances was the reduction from 39.5 to 38.3 and finally 37.8. Nothing to do with the GFA, nothing to do with the garage projection, nothing to do with the less than 25 feet on the rear property line to the town property. The remaining variances were left basically as is. I argued with the planning director and was told by the planning director that I was not listening to him. Obviously, the planning director knew better. The existing bylaws for our neighborhood were apparently not relevant in this case. My argument at the January 2020 meeting was that this new build, if allowed, as a result of these variances, would set a precedent for future house construction in the neighborhood and other areas in Oakville. I presented information showing comparisons of Committee of Adjustment decisions in the years 2019. The information showed the excessiveness of 3194's variances when compared to other requests for variances at Committee of Adjustment. My information was not looked at seriously. Once again, we were advised to retain a lawyer and or a planner or both. Why would we do that now if the town had agreed to the variances? Why should homeowners have to incur legal and planning costs to uphold existing bylaws? These bylaws weren't made up by 3190 and 3194 Shoreline Drive. These bylaws are on your books. The town of Oakville is fully equipped with legal, architectural, zoning, and planning staff which had been used in previous OMB and LPAT disputes. In my experience, legal costs would be in the $50,000 to $100,000 range, depending on the number of days at LPAT and 4 years of correspondence and discussions and the normal baggage, legal baggage and planning baggage you would pay for. Wouldn't we also be opposing our own town's position at LPAT? Was it a strategic move for the town to sign the agreement? We knew in January of 2020 that they had an agreement with the town, with the owners of the 3194. Was it a strategic move for the town to sign the agreement one day before the LPAT tribunal? That agreement was agreed on in January. In the summertime, Dennis Perlin had asked Cheeseman, would you please tell us where the signed thing is, the signed agreement? And it was signed one day before. What if the agreement was not signed by both parties? So was there a legal undertaking that it would be signed the day before? Would the LPAT still proceed the next day? At this point, it was clear that the town had thrown our position in its original position under the bus. Since we were now on our own, we decided to represent ourselves at LPAT. I communicated this decision to the town planning department, the mayor, and all town councilors by way of Dennis Perlin. We heard no objections, and the legal department sent me 36 pages of instructions and additional 6 pages for the specific tribunal case. Our local councilor, Dennis Perlin, and the lawyers we spoke to all stated that the decision at LPAT often depends on the person who is picked as LPAT chairman. As it turned out, our chairman's profession was in mediation. I believe he would have understood our objections had we been allowed to present our evidence. We realize Doug Ford's government is in favor of increased residential density and development. Look at Bronte Road and Lakeshore. That's a great example. But I have a hard time believing that replacing one 4-bedroom house with another 4-bedroom house and allowing 5 variants is his target audience. The situation in our area is totally different. I had indicated to the town that we would accept a reasonably sized house in keeping with the neighborhood. To give you an example, my house, well, of course, my neighbors think it's up bigger than this. My house is between 27 and 2,800 square feet on a 300 square foot larger lot. They're looking for a house, and I'm over by 300 feet according to the bylaw. They're looking for a house 300 or 400 square feet bigger than mine. And if they were allowed to do that, I could not object to it. I believe the chairman would have understood our objections had we been allowed to present our evidence. We received, LPAT appeal. We received little help from the planning department, and unfortunately our local councilors, compared to the time, effort, and consideration that was given to the owners of 3194, their 2 planners and lawyer Cheese, there was a clear discrimination against the neighborhood's position in favor of our 3194. Once the town decided not to object to the variances, I asked our councilor what could he do to help. His answer was that councilors could not get involved in neighborhood disputes. Is that not what the local councilor was doing at the 5 or 6 meetings with the planning department, 3194 and their consultants? How did this go from a town of Oakville bylaw zoning dispute to a neighborhood dispute? As time went on, lawyer Cheeseman delayed the LPAT dates twice. August 2019 date was delayed because lawyer Cheeseman wanted to combine a new site plan with the Committee of Adjustment. This didn't happen. The November tribunal date was delayed because lawyer Cheeseman needed to call an expert land use planner who was not available as a witness on the November date. It is clear that lawyer Cheeseman did not believe his LPAT appeal was a slam dunk, as the town's planning department believed. Dennis Perlin felt that this LPAT tribunal, depending on site plan status, could be a 4 or 5 day event. We interpreted that to mean that the lawyer and the planners and the expert witnesses had a lot of work to do on behalf of 3194 and would have a tough job convincing the tribunal. Fast forward to the new LPAT date of October 21st, 2020. We had just 30 days to scramble and prepare for the tribunal. I requested a reasonable delay to prepare a case, but lawyer Cheeseman would not approve my request, nor would the town. In fairness, Dennis Perlin did not voice an opinion. I am not sure why lawyer Cheeseman had 2 delays approved by the town, and yet the town did not approve our request for 1 short delay. For the record, the LPAT notifications, all 3 tribunal dates, clearly stated there would be no delays in rescheduling permitted from the original tribunal dates. Why were there 3194's request granted, but our single request was not? I had previously sent in my request to the case coordinator to be a party to the tribunal, and he stated I would granted that status at the opening of the tribunal. Lawyer Cheeseman and planner Capper knew that I would be involved in the proceedings. We submitted our exhibits and documents, 140 pages as required by LPAT regulations, to the LPAT coordinator, as well to Dennis Perlin and to lawyer Cheeseman. I received 350 pages, including the provincial policy statement from planner Capper and lawyer Cheeseman, only on October 9th. I opened it on October 19th at 6 p.m. That's a day and a half ahead of when we're going to the LPAT. It should be noted that months earlier, I did ask Dennis Perlin if we could look at the copy of the final agreement Lawyer Cheeseman was responsible to provide to the towns for signature. My understanding on LPAT that if there's an agreement made, but there are residents in the town that object to it, then the agreement has to be made up by the lawyer for 3194 Shoreline Drive. Hence, we got the agreement a day and a half before, or maybe a day before. I think it was dated the day before, but signed the day before. I did not receive a reply. In September 21st, emailed Dennis Perlin had asked Lawyer Cheeseman to provide the final signed agreement on the town's position, or the town's position would not be final before LPAT. What I found interesting, that after 3194's lawyer and planner received our exhibits and documents, David Capper was walking the neighborhood and taking all kinds of photos. Could it be that Lawyer Cheeseman and planner Capper realized we had prepared a solid case? All parties were aware it was not a settlement agreement as far as the residents were concerned. We were utterly opposed. It turned out on the day of the tribunal that it was, and we were not allowed to be a party. I was not allowed to present our exhibits and arguments. I was only allowed to comment on planner Capper's presentation, which was verbal. Anytime I asked a question or started engaging, I was told that the planner did not, you're not quoting the planner, the planner did not mention that, so I couldn't talk about it. I was basically muzzled. The town had signed the agreement on October 20th, one day before the hearing. Why was this? 5 variances had been agreed to by the town planning department 9 months before. This has nothing to do with COVID, by the way. Nobody met at that time. This was simply a delay tactic. Or was it a delay tactic? I don't know. October 23rd. The tribunal, the agreement was not signed until one day before the tribunal. Would it have been unreasonable for the town to ask the chairman to allow our arguments and information to be presented as a party to the hearing? After our submissions, the chairman could decide if 3194 or the town agreement would be allowed. Now, I believe I read in the paper that there were people objecting to the Cudmore development, and they were allowed to go to LPAT even though the town had signed an agreement. So 35 people wanted to go to LPAT. We were denied it. I think 75 people objected to Cudmore's project up there, and they were allowed to go. And I believe I'm quoting the mayor at one of the Cudmore development meetings saying, why is it people buy property and they all of a sudden don't want to obey the bylaws and they don't want to obey the zoning? I think I'm quoting you from the newspaper. Below is a comparison of 2 proposed new homes in our neighborhood that requested variances of GFA and lot coverage as submitted to the Committee of Adjustment at the same time that ours were in 2019. 3266 Shelburne Place. This is on the lakefront, on a subdivision beside us. Identical site circumstances. The lot size is 12,258 square feet, backing onto Lake Ontario and town parkland. Identical circumstances to 3194. The GFA allowance was 35%. They requested 37.51. The town allowed 36.34, an increase of 153 square feet where they wanted 304 square feet. This is a 12,000 square foot house that couldn't get, lot that couldn't get a bigger GFA or a bigger lot coverage. The lot coverage allowed was 25%. The requested lot coverage they asked for was 27.48. The planning allowed lot coverage of 25.85. So they got an increase of 102 square foot lot coverage compared to they asked for 302. No private garage projections or rear setback variances were requested. Again, this is identical situation. Bigger lots, bigger houses, same backing onto Lake Ontario. There's parkland in front of it. The other one I'm going to talk about is 3358 Lakeshore Road, which Mr. Cheeseman's very aware with because he represented them. The lot size was 17,706 square feet backing onto Lake Ontario and parkland. Identical site circumstances, only a much bigger piece of property. parkland and walkway in front. GFA allowance was 25%, and they requested 33.81. The planning department continued to object to this, and I'm told that lawyer Cheeseman dropped the GFA variance request before the tribunal date. Now here's a 17,706 square foot house that wanted an 869 square foot, 5% increase in GFA, almost, 100 square foot more than the 5350 square foot lot at 3194, and they didn't get it. He dropped it. They negotiated a deal where they got their lot coverage, but they didn't get the additional almost 1,000 square feet. What made 319 Shoreline Drive so special that it was granted 5 variances on the smallest lot when compared to the 2 neighborhood new builds shown above? I have no doubt that 3194 would have reduced their variance request before going to LPAT had the town planning department taken a stand. I do not believe that one 4-bedroom house replacing another 4-bedroom house would cause LPAT to grant these variances had they been rejected by the town. To quote an old phrase, the town did not put 3194's feet to the fire. The planning department was outgunned, intimidated, or outfoxed by 3194. Something made the town succumb to these variances, or possibly looked at objections and figured, yeah, it's only one house in Bronte, what's the big deal? Could it be that 3194's consultants, lawyer Cheeseman, 2 planners, and a threat of a land use expert and a town councilor being involved in their proposed new build was the reason for the planning department giving up? There are 3 sets.
Your worship, I don't mean to be rude here, but you clearly outlined at the onset what is
Councillor, patience, please. Mr. Spencer, you have not spoken about the site plan application, and I have given you latitude because I understand your sense of frustration at the way this didn't go the way you wanted. And I accept that that you welcome the opportunity to kind of air what you've been through, what some people might call retry the case. But all that's before council tonight is the site plan application. And you have not spoken to it in almost, in 29 minutes. We have a hard stop on our bylaw, which we can't go past without a resolution from council. And if you aren't going to speak to the site plan, they're unlikely to vote for that. So can I ask you to speak to the issue before us?
Well, I think I have spoken to it when I talk about mass and the size of the house and the closeness to the lakefront and the projecting garage. I think the mass of the house is something, and shadowing. I haven't gotten to the shadowing yet, and I haven't got to the privacy. Is mass not part of it?
These concerns are not part of site plan.
Well, I guess what has to happen here is, it may not be part of what you consider to be but it's part of it. It's next door to us. It's our site. We're next door to it. And the purpose of this, and I've got one or two paragraphs left, is the answer I get from residents is there's something fishy here. There's something going on here. All that the town granted, and by the way, even the planning report did not talk about the Committee of Adjustment rejecting it. They basically just said it was not undisputed at LPAT. Okay, so what makes this house? Another question, I guess, and this may not be a site plan. Can I get these same variances on my home? Can everybody in our subdivision get them? Obviously, the people on the subdivisions nearby in Shelburne and Lakeshore Road didn't get them. Obviously, the people up here, the 25 homes in Bronte, did not get a projecting garage. Sorry, I can't hear you right now. Sorry.
Sorry, sir. I was trying to say, cases are decided on individual circumstances, so who knows is the only possible answer to your question. I'm going to have to cut you off, and I thank you for the information that you've provided. And I actually appreciate hearing the detail of what you went through. And it's I guess I can say, it's an imperfect process that the Ontario government has established. And we're all down at the bottom of it. So thank you for thank you for your summary of what you've been through. And we have another delegation after you. So
I just want to say one thing.
Yes.
I'd like to thank Dennis Perlin for his great giving us as much information as we needed, and the people up there at the town that helped us go and get all this information. At the same time, I'm not going to talk about this anymore, but you got to take a look at it, and there's a major smell factor here. And if my neighbor decides he's going to launch a lawsuit from me for defending the town's zoning and bylaws, go right ahead. You should be named too.
That's a threat.
Anyways.
All right. Well,
that's it.
Look,
I'm cut off. I'm cut off.
Look, I appreciate your frustration. I hope you have some comfort from council having listened to the details of the back and forth that you've been through. Madam Clerk, would you call the remaining delegation, Tony Myrons?
The next delegation, last delegation, is Tony Myrons.
Mr. Myrons, welcome. Council looks forward to your information on the site plan application.
Was made a threat. That was heard by everybody. We didn't delay them, the process delayed them.
Stupid.
Mr. Mayor, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much. Please.
Yes, I apologize for taking the time. I'm new to Zoom. After the back and forth between yourself and Mr. Spencer, and given what you said at the beginning, reading out the rules with respect to the site plan, I will relinquish my time. I had a number of things to say and questions that I wanted to put to council, which I thought would help council make their determination. But it's clear that these questions aren't going to be answered because of the rules that you put forward. So I'm sorry to have taken up council's time. I was not aware of those specific rules. I thought that we were in a position, the 35 neighbors here, to be able to express our concerns again based on the evidence that Mr. Spencer had researched and put forward. But we will leave it to council to make its decision. And I thank you for my time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Myrons. I will undertake to meet with you and the others to see if there are measures that I can sponsor as mayor to make for a better process for all concerned in the future. And I regret very much the various insinuations, but I understand the logic that led you to them. And I didn't call you out on them because I feel you plural, because I could feel your frustration, but they were inappropriate. And
well, I'm not sure we don't want to get in a back and forth here, but I'm not sure what you mean by insinuations.
Oh, you made none. We heard some earlier, and all I wanted to try to say to you and the neighbors is that I would be willing to meet with you to see if there are ways we can work out to improve the system.
Well, I think we would all appreciate that.
All right. Thank you very much. I do appreciate the time and energy you all put into it. All right, I'm going to confine the question to table, and I'll look for a motion to approve the site plan application. Councilor O'Meara gives us the motion. Is there
Yes,
an
please.
objection to the motion? There being no
Sorry, Your
objection.
Worship, can I speak to the motion for a moment?
Oh, yes, of course.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. And I would like to just take this moment to let everybody know, now every time a councillor was mentioned in the 25 minutes, it was undoubtedly me they were speaking about, just so we're not playing cloak and dagger there. I can't tell you how disappointed I am to hear the frustration in the delegation's comments about that. I think it bodes ill on all of my council colleagues when we hear comments like that about something smells and there was some sort of underhandedness or these sorts of things. And I think it does a disservice to the entire process, and most importantly to our professional staff to hear comments that we heard this evening. The one benefit about the sort of the long delegation we heard is I actually had time to go back in my calendar and search exactly how many times I met with both sides, and it was 4 for the Spencers and Briggses, and it was 5 actually for the Susan Horwoods, and at that point we were also able to get a special contract written as well, that on behalf of the Horwoods to sign on to of concerns for the Spencers and the Briggses on the neighbors, and I think that was well. Just I will just put that our roles as councillors are to ensure that neighbors always have access to the process. They always have access to our staff, and they are always listened to. It's not to take sides. It is not to determine who's right and who's wrong. That's why we have a process in place, and that is why we ensure that everybody gets listened to. But at the end of the day, we do not influence decisions. We let the appropriate people in the places we put them in influence those decisions, and councillors do not have that authority. We do not have that sway, and we rely on our professional staff. My job, and I would like to thank all of my council colleagues' job, is to ensure that every single resident is being heard, to our staff, to the people that need to be heard, and that was always my goal. That is always my job. And I will also tell you that I am adamant that the other side feels that I inappropriately swayed the other side, because I had that many meetings. And this is one of those situations where you get sucked so far down into the weeds and you're never going to win. So I'm sorry that both sides both couldn't come out the way that they wanted, but unfortunately that's not how life works. But I would like to say unequivocally for the record that that I'm sorry that people feel that there was something awry with how the system worked. But all I will ever do is advocate for people to be heard and believe in the process, and I will continue to do that. I will always do that, and with that I support and will move the motion for the staff recommendation, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor, and I have to say, well said. I'll put the vote. Is there an objection to the motion? Madam Clerk, there being no objection, the motion carries. Council, I would like, we have a little bit of new business on behalf of Councillor Hazlitt-Thiel, and to accomplish that, I would ask for a mover to waive Section 2.2 of the Procedure Bylaw, the Rules of Procedure, to permit consideration of a notice of motion at this meeting. Could I have, I don't want to. Could I have a motion for that, please? Councillor Giddings, thank you. Is there an objection to the motion? There's no objection. Thank you, Council. That carries. Now I need another motion that in accordance with Section 2.2 of the Procedure Bylaw, that the procedure be waived to permit consideration of the notice this evening at this meeting. May I have a motion to that effect, please? Councillor Duddeck, thank you. Is there an objection to Councillor Duddeck's motion? Madam Clerk, I see none. It carries also. The The motion has been circulated to you, council, I believe, and I hope and pray. And it basically amounts to extending the timeline on a parking sign matter on Arkendo Street. And it's duly moved by Councillor Hazlitt Thiel. May I put the vote? Is there an objection to the motion? Madam Clerk, there is no objection to the motion, and I declare it. Councillor Chisholm, are you objecting?
Not objecting, I just have a question of the motion. Is that appropriate at this time?
Sure.
The extension to for Arkendo, does that imply that the other SPAs have the same?
Yes.
The same time?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, we're extending them all.
Thank you.
So I didn't see any objection last time, and I don't think I heard one there, but just to be safe, is there an objection to the motion? Madam Clerk, there is no objection. The motion carries. Thank you, everybody, for that. Now, the next step is I need a motion to rise and report. Councillor Hazlitt Thiel, thank you. Is there an objection to the motion? Madam Clerk, there's no objection. The motion to rise and report carries. I rise and report the Committee of the Whole has met and made recommendations on consent item 4.1, confidential consent item 5.1, public hearing items 6.1, 0.2, and 0.3, discussion items 7.1, 0.2, 0.3, and 0.4, 0.5, and 0.6, and advisory committee minutes item 9.1 as noted by the clerk. A mover and seconder for this report would be, oh, and the bylaw, we made a decision on the bylaw 2021-126. And the new business. And the notice of motion, yes, all right. The clerk will have that all captured. Councillor Longo, thank you for moving the report. Councillor Lishchina, thank you for seconding. Is there an objection to the report? Besides the clerk's, I mean. Madam Clerk, there's no objection to the report as corrected by your helpful intervention, and the report is adopted. And now we need a mover and seconder for the bylaws as noted in the agenda. And that will come from Councillor Sanju and Councillor Palmer. Thank you two. Is there an objection to those bylaws? Madam Clerk, there's no objection. The bylaws are duly carried. And thank you, Council, for your time and attention. You have really earned your titles today. And Councillor Sanju has a little bit of good news to share, which is, I think, a perfectly appropriate way to get toward the end of the meeting. Councillor Sanju.
Thank you, Mayor Burton, and I would like to take just a moment of your time, colleagues. I wish you would all please help me wish my sister-in-law and her husband, Hardale, so Amrit and Hardale Baya, a very hearty congratulations on the birth of their firstborn on Saturday of Neet Kaur Baya.
Now, you realize, Council, I think this means we get to start calling her Auntie.
For the fifth time.
For the good times. All right.
Your Worship,
Councillor O'Meara?
if you can bear me a minute, thank you. Brawny recently had the passing of a local historical icon in William Sargent, Sargent, who was a stalwart here in Brawny and in Oakville. And it's a sad, sad day that we lost him and his famous bow ties. And he was an excellent member and an incredible steward of our community. So our condolences go out to him and his family and to the whole community for the loss. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor. All right, Council, I think that ends the meeting. It's been great working with you.